It's a great day in Hyrule, y'all. Welcome to Sacred Realms, a Zelda Retrospective Podcast. I'm your host, Lyndon Willoughby, joined as always by my co-host, Matt Willoughby. Matt, it's time to put another Zelda game in the ground. We beat it.
We beat it. Let's, 12, 13, 14? I think it's 12.
Let's see.
It's 12.
I have a list for that.
Since this is season 11 and we did Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 in the same season.
You know, I'm going to take this opportunity to put a little X right next to Minish Cap. So there you go. Thus indicating that we have now beaten it. We have played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. This was our 11th game that we have beaten.
This is 12 because we played Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 in the same season. And this is season 11.
I have them listed separately.
That doesn't make any sense. That's not possible.
This is season 11, making it our 11th game.
No, because we played Zelda 1 and Zelda 2 in the same season.
Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Ocarina of Time, Link's Awakening, Skyward Sword, Link to the Past, Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda, Adventure of Link, Wind Waker, Link Between Worlds, Phantom Hourglass, Twilight Princess, Minish Cap. That's 12.
Well, which one don't I have marked on here?
I don't know.
What did I do?
I don't know. What did you do?
What did I do?
I don't know. I can't answer that for you. You just can't math.
I need to really dig into this at some later point because everything you're saying is correct, but I've just recounted the X's on this list several times. Like, I could understand if there were less than there should be because that would mean I just forgot to mark one, but there shouldn't be more, you know?
What?
Like,
you're not making any sense. You have less X's than you should have. That is exactly what's happening. You have 11 X's and we have played 12 games.
No.
Do you need to like take a minute and reset 2, 3, and like
4,
we just
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Oh, hey, there's number 2.
Oh my God. Okay, how long was that? That took how many minutes? That was what, 5 minutes of Lyndon trying to figure out how to count to 12?
I commit to cutting out no more than 20% of that just for posterity.
Good, I'm glad. I can go wake up your toddler and he could probably count those better than you did.
In Spanish too, probably.
Probably. He's a smart kid.
How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm better now that you just totally embarrassed yourself in front of all the people. That was really great.
Cool. Hey, I have never claimed to be a great numbersman, and I'm certainly not starting now.
Yeah, well, fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
That this is known about you. Yes.
The great thing about this episode, Matt, is that we have a guest on the show who has borne witness to this moment of grave embarrassment for me, this moment of numerical catastrophe. And that guest is the returning favorite, Josh from Zelda Universe. How you doing, Josh?
Right. Am I a favorite? Have we had this conversation before?
I feel like, yeah, you know what? And look, if you really feel like you want to fight that assertion and you want me to like generate data around that, then I'm sure I could. But do you want to?
I don't really think we want to do that.
No, I feel like just take the compliment and run with it.
All right. Well, I'll be sure to remind you of your embarrassment next time I see you.
Okay, that's fair.
Good.
That's only fair. I really do bring those things on myself. How you doing tonight, Josh?
Oh, I'm okay. I'm ready for the cold to be over.
Yeah, it's not too terrible out there today. Especially as compared to what we were dealing with last week. It's a little bit more hospitable, which I do appreciate.
The last couple of weeks have been brutal.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. But yeah, it's funny. We were talking before we started recording about this wonderful game that we all just finished playing. Matt and I finished our chunks of game today, and you, in classic overachieving fashion, knocked it out about a month and a half ago. So well done, good on you.
Yeah, I actually partially did that on accident. I wanted to finish the game before New Year's, but I also was miscounting how many weeks I had. It was like I totally forgot about 2 dungeons in this game.
Did you beat this game on accident the same way that the cobbler in Hyrule Town makes Pegasus boots on accident?
Yes, the Minish beat the game for me.
There you go.
That tracks.
Now. Yeah. No, it's. I mean, obviously, you've got a lot of things that you're playing so that you can cover them on a variety of places. Yeah, and honestly, it's kind of hard to blame you because I feel like if I hadn't been in a position of needing to pace myself in order to cover this game week to week, then I probably would have just like ripped through it as well. Because it's just that sort of game. Like I really could have chewed into this pretty hard, I think. But anyway, it's gonna be a fun one to talk about for sure. I mean, we were talking again before we started recording, and you were telling us about kind of an old favorite that you've come back to in the last few weeks. You want to talk about that for a minute?
I don't recall what you're referring to.
Golden Sun?
Oh, yeah. I've actually only been playing it for a couple days. But yeah, I mean, I think so far it's holding up pretty good. I mean, it's classic JRPG mixed with Zelda puzzles. Not very many games have really done that. I can only actually think of one other that I've ever played that does the same thing. But yeah, it's on NSO now. You can check it out. Get another See Cryonis 20 years before Nintendo invented Cryonis in a Zelda game. And otherwise, get your block puzzles, your block puzzle fix.
Do you think? Yeah, right. Well, if there's one thing that we're a big fan of on this show, it's block puzzles, whether they be of the sliding ice variety or the Igor and Greg variety. Do you feel like there's anything else that is like that you're just expecting to come to the Game Boy Advance NSO situation, Josh? I mean, it seems like it's pretty comprehensive as far as like what I remember being the big hits on Game Boy Advance.
So we're still missing. There's one more Fire Emblem game that came to the United States. If we're really being really bold, there's another Fire Emblem game that didn't come to the United States. If I'm going to be really, really, really bold, Mother 3. And then, but there's also A Link to the Past 4 Swords, which I think has a really good shot of showing up because they've already put in the re-releases of the other Mario games that had bonus content added. And a lot of people don't realize that A Link to the Past on the Game Boy Advance is not the same exact game. For starters, the Ice Palace has changed, which I'm pretty sure we discussed, or you discussed during that season. That the
Igor the Block does not exist in the Game Boy Advance version, right?
Right, I believe that's correct. I get mixed up on which ones of your blocks are which, but yes.
That's fair.
But yeah, so
they do collect them.
They changed the Ice Palace, but then there's also bonus content in there. There's a whole other dungeon in that version of A Link to the Past that I would go as far as to say most Zelda fans have never ever played. Because the original version of Four Swords, because of course they re-released it on the DS as the Anniversary Edition. The original version works together with A Link to the Past, and so beating Four Swords would unlock extra features in A Link to the Past. So there's an entire extra side quest that unlocks the Hurricane Spin in A Link to the Past, and then there is an extra dungeon, the Palace of the Four Sword. Which I've actually only done one time.
So when you say it's an extra dungeon, are we talking about something of like a similar length and density as the color dungeon in Link's Awakening?
I believe that's a fair assumption. Like I said, like the color dungeon, everybody who has the game can play whenever they want. So like I remember the color dungeon because I finished it several times. I have not completed the Palace of the Four Sword in 20 years because the only way to unlock it is to have another friend to play the Game Boy Advance version of A Link to the Past with.
Yeah,
that
makes sense.
I did it once with a family member, and that is the only time I have ever done it, so that we could each see the new content in A Link to the Past at the time. So yeah, I feel like once that gets added, I think it will get added with online play, right? Since they all come with that.
Yeah.
So I think that's there. There's some F-Zero games on the Game Boy Advance that people like. And then like there's third-party games. They always grab a bunch. But the Game Boy Advance has a really solid library. And so I don't think it's done by any means. I feel like they'll get more for us. It's hard for me to think of other things off the top of my head.
Well, I was gonna say we're not. That's without even getting into the Pokemon side of the discussion,
right?
Which is
like the Game Boy, even the Game Boy Pokemon games haven't shown up yet, and I'm sure they'll
Right,
do those
yeah.
first. They'll trickle out blue and red, and then give us yellow a year later, and then gold and silver a year after that.
yeah, exactly right. Watch Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow drop on the game or on the Switch the same day as Pal World.
Oh my gosh.
That's dating this episode of the
notable-
pod.
Yeah, I know, right?
Dude.
Notably non-controversial game of the week, Pal World.
Dude, I have not played a Pokemon game in so long. Like, I can't remember the last Pokemon game I played. It was probably like Alpha Ruby or Omega Sapphire or whatever. Alpha Sapphire, Omega Ruby, whichever way it was.
The last one that the last one that I played, which I did play quite a lot of, was Let's Go Pikachu. Actually, I got Let's Go Eevee, which I actually found to be, like, regardless of the fact that it was kind of Pokemon for, I was gonna say Pokemon for dummies. It's baby's first Pokemon. The mechanics are dumbed down a little bit, but I actually found it to be like a really enjoyable remake of Red and Blue.
Yeah, I actually I played Let's Go Pikachu, and yeah, I'm pretty much I like Pokemon, like the concept, the world, the creatures. You know, like I keep a little Pikachu stuffy in the back of my car. Back window, like it's just been there forever, and so like I like Pokemon well enough, but I'm pretty much over the main Pokemon games, and so Let's Go Pikachu was a nice just little nostalgia run to just dash through it. I tend to play
one day heart.
Go ahead.
Oh no! You.
I was gonna say I tend to play like every other Pokemon game they make, but I usually just borrow them from a friend because I know enough major Pokemon fans that buy every version of every game. So.
Yeah, that's smart for sure. I feel like Heart Gold and Soul Silver are going to come back into my life in like a very major way at some point before too long. I'm always like existing at like a 50 to 75% want to replay those. I consider them to be the best of the series. So that'll happen at someday. Soon-ish. I don't know. Who could tell? But anyway, yeah. So fun aside about Pokemon, not a Pokemon podcast, is a Zelda podcast. So we should probably get to talking about that. But definitely fun, shooting the shit about the future of the Nintendo Switch Online service with you, Josh, because it's one of those things where, especially with like a new console looming on the horizon, it does make you wonder, like, how's this all going to pan out by the end of the year? I don't know.
I hope they, like, my number one wish for Switch 2 is just don't start over with the retro collection again, please. If you tell me that the Switch 2 is going to launch and congratulations, you can play Super Mario Brothers and Zelda 1. It's like, I love those games, but I just want to take what I already have and keep building on it. Because there's plenty of games. Like, this a little bit of an aside here. My favorite thing about Nintendo Switch Online is not that I get all the Zelda games on my Switch, even though that is great. It's that I get all that weird stuff that I otherwise wouldn't bother with. Because there's no way in the world I would ever spend $5 to play Solomon's Key and just own it. But it's really cool that my subscription lets me try it out. And there's a lot of games that I really like now that I would have never, ever bothered with if it was just a buy every game for $5 kind of setup. And so I really enjoy just jumping in and trying every game they add just to see what it was about. And that's why I don't think the N64 is done. I don't think the Game Boy Advance is done. I think there's stuff everyone's forgotten about that will show up and will be like, oh yeah, this game. Or it'll be something you've never heard of, and you'll get to try out Pokemon Puzzle League for the first time and find out that it's one of the best puzzle games ever made.
There are two things that I really, really, really want them to bring to Nintendo Switch Online. One of them is Pokemon Pinball on Game Boy Color, because that game was great. That was like a drive into school classic for us growing up. I don't know if you ever played too much of it.
Matt, I did. Totally did.
Yeah. Love that game. But also I want them to do a Zelda 100, the same way that they've done the F-Zero 100 and Super Mario 1. Basically just give me like a dinky little Link to the Past battle royale in NSO. It sounds great.
Yeah, as long as they don't delete them, I'm cool with that. Like I spent way too much time with F-099 for about a month.
Oh, is it 99? It's not 100?
Yeah, I think they just thematically have, like, it's Tetris 99 and Pac-Man 99, and
Okay.
Mario was actually only 35 because it was Mario's 35th anniversary.
35th anniversary. Yeah.
But
well, see, I was just rounding up, but I guess that one.
I mean,
extra
yeah. How
is
do you
enough
really
to
tell?
ruin the whole thing?
Yeah. How do you tell a difference between 99 and 100 when it's just a big mess of people? 50 of the people are eliminated immediately.
I would say that you probably can't. So there you go. I stand by it. All right, y'all, let's go ahead and do some housekeeping, get into the episode. It's going to be a fun one. These final episodes of the main part of the season are always so interesting and fun from a plot perspective. I look forward to them quite a lot. Before we get into the housekeeping, Matt, you know what time it is?
It's Whiskey Bit.
It's Whiskey Bit time.
Yay!
And I was actually, somebody's probably, if anyone is actually paying attention to this and has a good memory about it, let me know if we've done this one before. I'm 50-50 on whether or not we've done the Sagamore Rye on the show.
Possible.
It's not one that I have a lot, but tonight we're enjoying Sagamore Spirit Double Oaked Rye, which is a rye whiskey that has been aged in 2 different oak barrels and thus has a nice rich flavor to it. This bottle was gifted to me by Jackson as a present for me being a groomsman in his wedding.
No, that was gifted to you by me for officiating my wedding.
That's right. What did Jackson get me? I get whiskey for everything.
That's true.
It's kind of hard to keep track, but this bottle was gifted to me by my esteemed co-host and brother, whom I love quite a lot, Matt, in repayment for the service of officiating his wedding, which I should probably start, planning and writing and all that.
Probably. It's less than 60 days away.
Tell you what, once we get on the other side of your bachelor party, which is next weekend, I'll do that.
There you go. Fair enough.
Okay. Matt, here's to Sagamore Spirit Double Oak Rye.
Cheers.
And also to your bachelor party next weekend.
Yeah, next weekend. Woo! Oh, that's tasty. A double oaked rye is such a cool collection of things.
Yeah.
It makes a very unique flavor profile. Sweet, but a little spicy. Very good. Very good.
It's nice. Yeah, I get a lot of that classic rye spice, but a little bit of maple on that finish as well. Which, that's a good combination of things. All right, y'all. If you didn't know, Sacred Realms is a weekly re-examination of The Legend of Zelda, one little slice at a time. Sacred Realms drops every Wednesday and is available on all major podcast networks. Every week, we play a new section of a Zelda game, and then we sit down here to talk and to drop our hot takes. If that sounds fun to you, please head over to Apple Podcasts, hit that subscribe button, be sure to leave us a review. 5-star reviews are greatly appreciated, and they have a chance to get a shout out here on the show. If you want more Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod to get access to our Discord channel, listener mail, participate in the bloodbath that is the voting of our next game.
It's been particularly interesting this time around.
Yeah, by the time everyone's listening to this episode, the poll will have closed. It actually closes at midnight tonight, the night that we're recording. And I hate to break it to our listeners who probably actually love this, but it seems like Spirit Tracks is going to be what we're getting into next. So look forward to listening to us suffer. But you know what? It's great because odds are we're probably going to like it more than we're expecting to. And also we're coming off of a spectacular game, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, look, we have to play it anyway. Let's go ahead and get it out of the way. And look, we're coming off of a high. So let's just do it. Let's just do it.
Couldn't agree more. Additionally, one of the benefits that Master Sword patrons and above get is that we read their names every week here on the show. Oh, I closed out of that tab. I even opened it in time for the episode, and then I clicked that little X. Now it's gone. I got to pull it back up. Active payment.
Nice.
Master Sword, Big Orange Sword. There we go. Those legendary individuals are Brandon, Shrikewill, Joseph, Nintendo, Adam, Sakura Sky, Art, Jeremy, Dante 2, Tom, Andy, Billy, Connor, Rachel, Shepherd Street, Matthew, Chris, Daniel, Fallout 907, Kelso, Chris, Tiffany the Star, Patrice, Stephanie, Darknuck, Il Maestro himself, Brian, George, Mike, Dylan, Lennon, Kolku, Rowan, Josh, Nick, Dante 1, Gep, Brittany, Davey, Haru, The Mighty, Derek, Albert, Mark, Andy, Cameron, Ben, Daniel, Nick D _ TV, Hyrule Interviews, aka Max Nichols, Garrett, and Drew. These are the most legendary of individuals, and I would explore a dark, cursed, negative version of a nation's capital with any of them any day of the week.
I mean, yes, absolutely. That sounds really fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
No doubt.
Glad you agree.
Yeah.
I was actually iffy about that one. I was like, he's not going to want to do that.
Totally.
Sounds
that sounds really great. Like exploring a capital in general, but a dark, twisted version. Like imagine going to the White House during a zombie apocalypse. That sounds kind of fun.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I see where you're coming at.
Yeah. I'm down for that.
In like a video gamey kind of way, I think that sounds fun. But
yes, I wouldn't want to, like in real life, that sounds terrifying, but you know.
Yeah. Okay. But without further ado, let's talk about what we played. We do that every week, and the Sacred Realms Rundown, which is a 6-part analysis of what we played this week and the feelings that it made us feel. Today, we are covering the Minish Cap, Chapter 6. Part 1 of the Sacred Realms Rundown is, as always, the plot recap, this week read by Matt. Take it away, Matt.
After leaving the Palace of Winds, we head back to Hyrule Castletown using the Ocarina. Once we land in town, we set our sights back to the castle and the Elemental Sanctuary. Just as before, we are blocked from entrance by the guards who claim that the king has banned entrance to all, so we sneak around the side and through the hidden garden path to the basement of the castle. Bypassing the crumbling walkways and the snakes, we enter the castle and make our way back to the Elemental Sanctuary. Once inside, we fuse the Picori blade with the last of the 4 elements, and with the combined might of all of the elements, it transforms into the 4 sword, a blade with a golden hilt and the power to break the curse that Vati has put on the princess. As we unleash the power of the sword, the stone at the back of the room vanishes, opening up a new pathway deeper into the sanctuary. Following this new path, we see a collection of stained glass windows that tell the story of the ancient hero and the Picori blade. The story is well known to us, but a new part of the story is revealed, and that the golden power that helped the ancient hero seal away the evil came to reside in the royal line of Hyrule's princesses. Just as we finish reading the last of the glass frames, we hear a sinister laugh echo across the chamber. The voice is coming from the king, who appeared in the room as if from thin air, and whose demeanor is unlike the kindly monarch we have known our whole lives. To our horror, the king begins to speak not to us, but to Eslo, mocking him about creating the magical cap, and now leading him directly to the secret of the location of the golden power. As the realization dawns on us, the king's shape wavers and reveals our foe, Vati. Before we can react, Vati has thrown a ball of lightning at us and we are unable to avoid it. As the pain surges through our body and we fall to the ground, we hear his triumphant laugh and sense him leave the room to pursue the golden force, which he now knows resides within the body of Princess Zelda. Eslo's shouts eventually bring us back around to consciousness, but it is apparent that quite a bit of time has passed, and the thought of what Vati could have done in the intervening time sends chills through our whole body. Eslo gives us a quick rundown about what Vati will inevitably do: sacrifice Zelda in order to absorb the light force from her and become an unstoppable force of evil magic in the process. We run as fast as we can back to Hyrule Castle, only to find that while we were unconscious, the entire palace has been transformed into a twisted mockery of its former grandeur. The ground is shattered outside the sanctuary, and everything from the decor to the color of the stones and shapes of the statues has been changed into a dark mimic of the original. Where once was green grass and trees, now only red stone and gray walls with evil eye motifs appear. In the courtyard leading to the Elemental Sanctuary, we see a handful of stone statues that look like a couple of guards and the Prime Minister. We surmise that Vati has used his foul magic not only to transform the castle, but to curse anyone that stands in his way, just like he cursed Zelda. We use the power of the Four Sword to free the minister and the two guards, who needlessly recap the situation for us before spurring us on to rescue Zelda as quickly as possible. Entering the basement of the Twisted Hyrule Castle, we see that Vati's magic has affected the entire area, not just the elemental sanctuary. The castle is filled with dark green carpets, purple tiles, and the evil eye motifs are on every wall, and they seem to watch us as we progress through the castle. Most disturbing of all are the sickly green flames that fill all the lanterns and plinths in the castle, as they fill the air with a sinister glow and a feeling of dark dread. Vati has not limited himself to aesthetic changes either, as he has filled the entire castle with his minions, and has somehow utterly changed the layout of the castle as well. As we progress through this new, dark version of the castle, vanquishing monsters and avoiding flame traps, we make our way to the dungeons, where we find the stone-cursed statue of King Daltus. Grateful that Hyrule's monarch is still alive, we find a way to free him as quickly as possible. Once free of his cell and the curse that holds him as stone, he gives us a key to unlock the door into the main area of the castle, and admonishes us to hurry as quickly as we can to the top of the castle to find and stop Vati. We head off immediately to the main level, past a coven of Wizrobes, a handful of Stalfos, and a moblin or two. As we reach the main floor, we see that it would be possible for us to leave the castle to restock on potions and supplies before we push into the top floors. But with Zelda in peril, we ignore the tantalizing light of the free world outside and push ahead into the darkness. The rest of the castle is just as dark and twisted as the lower level. The enemies are plentiful and aggressive, and the traps are numerous and devious. From cannonballs that are shot at us from stone pillars that have to be reflected simultaneously, to color-changing tiles that have to be activated in a certain order, we're pushed to the limit of our cleverness and ingenuity. Some rooms are seemingly dead ends, but tapping the stone walls with our sword reveals weak spots vulnerable to bombing. Rooms full of enemies, from wallmasters to Keese to a dozen Keatons at once, block our progress at every turn, as Vati attempts to keep us from reaching the upper levels. As we reach the next level, we're confronted by a red dark nut in the room that holds the king's once regal throne. We've had plenty of experience with these armored knights up to this point, and make quick work of him. Once he falls, we notice that the throne makes an odd movement, and after claiming the compass from the next room, we investigate the large chair to see what secrets it holds. Once we move it aside, we find the path to the next level through a dark basement passage littered with Keese and Gibdos. As we continue climbing, we find ourselves outside the castle, on the walls, looking off into a sickly purple sky. The way forward is only accessible by floating from vortex to vortex with Eslo, so we leap off the solid stone of the castle rampart and into the evil air. We end up navigating from the side of the castle all the way to the front, where we find an entrance above where the main door sits, leading into a new antechamber of Vati's twisted design. After opening the colossal door, we head into the labyrinth that Vati has designed for this upper level of the castle. The first room we enter contains two golden knights wielding ball and chains, protecting the door leading to the roof. This door is locked by chains that require the big key to open, and after felling the two knights, we go off in search of that key. On the far side of the labyrinth, we find the chest that must contain the big key, but it is blocked by a huge stone that will require all 4 copies of ourselves to push aside. Further complicating the issue is that the stone is blocked by 4 smaller blocks that all require keys to remove, so it seems we must hunt down 4 more small keys before we can reach the big key. As soon as we enter the labyrinth again, we are accosted by a Darknut in black armor. While he is more formidable than the normal Darknut, a combo of bombs and slashes from the Four Sword is more than enough to take him down. But as he falls, we feel the magic emanate across the castle as bolts of lightning strike within the rooms, and we fear that our path has been complicated by even more enemies blocking the way to the keys that we need. In each of the 4 corner rooms of the labyrinth, guarding the turrets to the castle, we find 1 or more Darknuts. The ones in pairs wear new armor of white and red and green, and the attack patterns of two Darknut at once is a terror on the battlefield. Each turret of the castle contains a few more traps or puzzles for us to solve, but after dealing with the Darknuts, it is a relatively quick jaunt to the key that they guarded. After a grueling gauntlet of battle and puzzle solving, we possess all 4 keys we need to take hold of the big key. We warp back to the antechamber of the boss room and use the key to open the door to the top of the castle. As soon as we enter the walkway behind the door, Vati's voice rings out from thin air once more. He's annoyed by our persistence, but warns that he is almost done with the ritual to drain Zelda of the light force within her. Once the 3rd bell chimes, the ritual will be complete, and Vati will possess the full power of the light force, leaving Zelda an empty husk. The pathway to the roof where Vati is holding the ritual is of course littered with enemies. Another golden knight with a ball and chain blocks our path right away, but we make quick work of him. In the next room, the 1st bell chimes, and we find ourselves facing a horde of Keatons and a door that can only be unlocked by standing on 4 switches simultaneously. In the next room, we hear the 2nd bell chime, but as we make our way towards the final door leading to the roof, 3 fully armored Darknuts spawn into the room in a flash of lightning. In this wide-open room with no cover, we have no choice but to dive headfirst into desperate combat with these fierce foes. While we chip away at these heavily armored enemies, desperately trying to avoid their deadly attacks, we know that time is slipping away all too quickly. With a furious combination of bombs and sword slashes, we finally defeat all 3 Darknuts and rush to the roof. We stop Vati just in time. The ritual to drain Zelda of the Light Force is incomplete, but Vati was able to secure more than a small amount from the transference. He boasts that what he does have should be more than enough to destroy us, and opens up a hole in the stone beneath our feet. We fall back to the floor below, where we just defeated the trio of Darknuts, and shortly after, Vati appears in the room with us. He shouts that he will have no more of us interfering with his plans, and then his shape begins to shift and alter. His body is encased in thick shadows and begins to grow to a crazy height, expanding and widening and taking on a horrible new form. Before us, Vati has transformed into a tall and terrible wizard of horrifying strength. His robes float several inches off the ground and he is wreathed in flame. But the most horrible thing of all is the enormous eye that now covers his entire torso, peering out at us with utter malevolence and insanity. He creates 2 smaller eyes that begin to orbit him with speed, and the battle with Vati Reborn has begun. We start by avoiding the orbiting eyeballs and trying to get some space to work out how to attack our foe. He's impervious to all of our arsenal at the moment, so instead we focus on the smaller eyes. Once we destroy both of them, Vati seems to be stunned for a moment, and the eye covering his torso opens briefly, allowing us to move in and slash away with the Force Sword. He quickly recovers, however, and spawns more eyeball minions, as well as shooting gouts of flame from his hands. As we dodge around the room to avoid the deadly fire, we also see him spawn an orb of pure darkness that begins to chase us around the room. Avoiding all these deadly missiles at once is a difficult task, but eventually we're able to destroy his eyeball minions and get another round of damage on the wizard. Not done with his tricks yet, Vati summons 4 more orbiting eyes and then shrouds them in impenetrable darkness as he begins to fly around the room faster. At certain points, Vati will slow his pace, the eyes stop orbiting, and they project deadly lasers that threaten to cook us where we stand. The Force Sword can't cut through the Shroud of Darkness, so we pull out our handy gust jar to see if we can remove the protective layer, and sure enough, that does the trick. With the eyes vulnerable once more, we make short work of them and again move in to attack the wizard. Vati instead begins to teleport frantically around the room, forcing us to follow as fast as we can, while we try to get in hits on his torso. Yet again, our foe begins to circle with darkness-shrouded minions, but now we know his tricks and make short work of the eyes that protect him. With one more desperate slash from the Force Sword, we bring our enemy to heel. Instead of the normal explosion of defeat, we are surrounded by a bright white light and a feeling of weightlessness. We open our eyes to find ourselves in a nether region of red tile with a thin layer of water on the ground. In front of us are replication pads in a square, but Vati is nowhere to be seen. He begins to speak to us, surprised that we're able to defeat his first form, but promises that we will not survive what is to come. Vati's wizard form floats down to the center of the replication pads and boasts of his new power, claiming that our puny sword will not save us from the power he now possesses. He once again wreathes his body in shadow, and it takes on a grotesque shape-shifting aspect. Before it solidifies, a single bright red eye peers at us from the shadows, and then the form solidifies into a giant black eyeball, with that single red eye staring at us. Vati Transfigured is surrounded by 8 purple orbs and an aura of shadow magic, and it immediately begins to charge us. It slams on the ground, scattering violet crystals that are needle-sharp across the ground. We slash away at the monster in front of us, but the Force Sword bounces harmlessly off the orbs, protecting the main eye. Instead, we get some distance and pull out the bow, hoping that this will work where the sword failed. While the arrow doesn't harm the eye, it does strike the orbs surrounding the eye and turn them from purple to red, forcing them to open, revealing their red irises. We understand, because of the replication platforms, that we are meant to open 4 of these orbs and then destroy them at once with our replicated self. So we dodge around the crystalline spike traps and open up the 4 orbs that the arrows hit. Once replicated, we slash away at the orbs, destroying them and opening Vati up for punishment from our puny sword. Just as before, he recovers quickly and begins the process once again. We fire away at the orbs surrounding the central eye, striking some that turn blue and invulnerable instead of red, but eventually we find the right 4 that need destroying. The whole time we fight this blob of shadow and eyes, it rains down crystalline traps, causes boulders to fall from the ceiling, and shoots balls of lightning at us. But at the end of the day, this monster of shadow is no match for us, or the power of the sacred Force Sword. After what seems like a dozen rounds of destroying the orbs and slashing away at Vati, he finally utters a piercing scream of agony and falls in defeat. He shouts his debilitating disbelief before vanishing in an explosion of smoke and fire. We find ourselves back in the room where we faced Vati Reborn, exhausted from our ordeal against the 2 forms of Vati and the myriad challenges we faced to get here. But Zelda is still encased in stone, so we quickly head up to the roof to free her from her curse. As the power of the Force Sword makes contact with her prone form, we see the stone fade away and the natural color of our dear friend return to normal. She briefly seems confused by her surroundings, but quickly jumps down from the ritual table and thanks us for rescuing her. She tells us that while she was encased in stone, she saw visions of us as we went about our quest to restore the Picori blade. No sooner has she returned to normal and thanked us when the castle begins to rumble and chunks of stone begin to fall from the walls and ceilings. The castle is collapsing now that its Dark Master has fallen. We take Zelda and flee to the main level, hoping to exit the deteriorating castle before it can fall and crush us. The debris from the collapse has blocked the exit, however, so Ezlo suggests we head back to the sanctuary, as it may be the only place that we can safely escape the falling rocks. Before we can enter the sanctuary, a bolt of magical lightning strikes the ground in front of the door, and Vati's voice echoes around the room. Now you'll see the true power of the Light Force. You cannot escape, for I have become Vati, the master of this world. With these words echoing across the room, we find ourselves once again transported to another world of Vati's making. This time we find ourselves standing on a floating platform in a featureless purple sky, and Vati's enormous eyeball form floating down to join us. He has changed the form by adding an ornate golden armor to his orb, as well as giant golden horns like that of an ox atop his head. As he floats, he extends his 2 arms of pure shadow, tipped with razor-sharp golden claws, and 4 smaller eyeballs appear to protect the main iris. Vati's final form, his wrath, has come to destroy us once and for all. Vati's wrath is extremely aggressive right out of the gate, as it tries to swipe us with claws, push us off the ledge, and it even detaches one of its arms occasionally to chase us around the floating arena. Nothing we can do can damage the main eye or the 4 smaller eyes protecting it, so we surmise that we have to deal with the arms first. As we frantically evade the monster around the map, we throw everything in our arsenal at it to try to find something that will work. After exhausting nearly everything in our pack, we desperately throw a beam from the cane of Pachi at the currently detached arm. And to our shock, the arm goes rigid, reaching straight up into the sky and revealing a small Minish-sized door at the base. We use the handy Minish portal nearby and enter the arm to find a swarm of small metal creatures that appear to be the inner workings of the arm. We slash away at them until we strike one that is slightly different from the others, and once it explodes, the entire arm goes up in smoke with it. We regrow to normal size and repeat the process with the second arm, leaving only the eyes left to deal with. Of course, Vati is not going to make this easy on us, as he throws copious amounts of magical lightning our way and continues to try to push us off the ledge. With all 4 of his smaller eyes open now, we start trying to destroy them to open up the larger eye for damage. Arrows and bombs have no effect, but once they shoot beams of energy at us, we reflexively deflect them with our sword, destroying 1 or 2 of the eyes with their own magic. They immediately regrow, however, so we get the idea to reflect all 4 at once by replicating ourselves with the nearby platforms. We dodge Vati's attacks until he once again shoots at us with energy from the smaller eyes. Now replicated and ready for it, we deflect all 4 beams and stun the eyes. Moving in with our copies, we destroy the protective layer of orbs and move in on Vati at last. Not to be denied, Vati recovers and reforms the 4 eyes once more. More lightning and magic fill the arena, and he begins to move faster and more frantically as he begins to fear his defeat. With 3 more rounds of damage, Vati finally falls to the ground and does not rise again. His shock at his defeat is complete, and his denial rings out into this netherworld of his own creation. The stolen light force has not helped him win this day, and he has proven that power alone is not enough to overcome the forces of good. As he continues to bellow his disbelief, his form begins to fracture, and pink energy explodes from within, shattering his golden horns and armor, until his entire being is engulfed in the escaping magic. After the explosion is complete, and he is gone, a red hat rimmed with gold and set with a flawless ruby lays in the middle of the arena, pulsing softly with a magical glow all its own. As Vati's netherworld disappears, we find ourselves once again in the room that leads into the elemental sanctuary, with Zelda and the magical cap. The castle is still in its dark and twisted shape, and much of it has fallen to ruin, but Vati is finally defeated once and for all. We feel a strange sensation on our head, and suddenly Eslo is floating off our head and over the ground. And before we can do anything, he is suddenly engulfed in white light and transformed back into his normal form. He isn't a Minish, however. Instead, he stands as tall as a normal human, aged and wizened, but certainly no longer a hat. His shock at being returned to normal is no less than our own, but that doesn't cause him to forget his manners in the presence of Hyrule's royalty. He apologizes for the mess that his creation has caused, for without the magical cap that Vati stole, none of this would have happened. He does, however, have an idea of how to set things right. For if someone of pure heart and intent were to use the cap, they might set right all that Vati destroyed. Eslo suggests that Princess Zelda put on the magical cap and use her pure heart and the power of the light force within her to make this wish. And just maybe, all will return to normal. With some trepidation, Zelda dons the cap and makes her wish to set right the castle, its people, and the land to the way that it was before Vati interfered. We watch in awe as Zelda, the cap, and Eslo emanate with powerful magic, and rays of pure white light fly forth from the princess into the world. In a flash, the magical cap disappears, used up by the intense power of the spell that it is weaving, and we feel and see the castle returning to normal. The green carpets disappear, replaced by their regal red. The stone in the courtyard is replaced with the green grass and the garden, and the sickly green fires and the haunting eye motifs are snuffed out once and for all. By the end of the spell, Hyrule Castle is back to normal, and Zelda assures us that everyone cursed by Vati has also been returned to their normal state, and the monsters that have roamed Hyrule have been banished once more. Ezlo looks at what's left of his creation, the magical hat, which has been destroyed by the sheer magnitude of power that flowed through it. But he's not sad by the destruction of his greatest creation. As the magic takes hold across the land, the portal to the elemental sanctuary and the realm of the Minish begins to shake and rumble. It appears that the portal to the Minish world will soon close and will not reopen for another century. With this in mind, it is time for Ezlo to return to the realm of the Minish, where he belongs. He turns to us to say farewell, saddened by our parting, but grateful to have shared in this adventure with us. As a parting gift, he creates for us a green hat to take his place upon our head. It seems right and fitting to carry this with us as a token of remembrance of this journey and our dear friend Ezlo. With a final farewell, Ezlo turns himself into a Minish and enters the portal back to the Minish world. As the door closes for another century, we turn back to the princess and to the kingdom of Hyrule, knowing that all is well once more.
Well done, as always, Matt. That brings us to part 2, which is our takes, where we talk about this section of the game and how it made us feel. And of course, weeks like this where we're finishing a game are a little different, right? Because when we're talking about like, oh, usually we've got like a between section and we go to 1 or 2 locations, right? And there's really not any of that this week. So
Sure.
what we typically do in these penultimate episodes of the season is we talk more about plot and the story that we learn and the way that the game wraps up, right? And then in the dungeon map, we talk about the arrangement of the final dungeon.
Yep.
So,
I mean, I went and did some extra things, but I guess we'll probably talk about those on Blueberry
well,
Trails.
you know, we have a section
Yeah,
for
we have
that.
Blueberry Trails.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, fine.
Cool.
Yes.
So, Josh, I'm going to pass it over to you first. Let's talk about the way that Minish Cap ends. I mean, do we feel that this is a fun final chapter that has some good closure, good story beats? Where are you at with it?
With the story, it's fine. I don't think the story is particularly that special. But no, I mean it. We're going into the ending, right? Like the very end, also.
Yeah. We're just kind of talking generally, just tying the game up here.
Yeah. So a lot gets said about Link getting his hat. That's the big part of the ending that people really narrow in on. Otherwise, it's sort of just, hooray, you saved the world. I don't really think it's the highlight of this game in general, right? That it comes across to me very much mostly as just, hey, there's a bad guy, go get him. And so here it's like, okay, so the castle, he was already controlling the castle anyway. Now he's decided to redecorate.
Make the castle evil.
And you go into the castle and all the people that were captured, you uncapture. And then you go get him. And so it's like, it's neat seeing Ezlo get his form back. It's nice to get a hat, even though I think this spread of Link looks better without one.
It's so funny, right? Because it's like Link does get his Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade moment at the end here, right? Where it's like, hey, that's how he got his headgear. It's like, cool. I'm glad I know that. It was integral to my enjoyment of that character, knowing how he got the hat, right? I mean, it's one of those things where it definitely does not have kind of the grand epic scale that some Zeldas have, that even some top-down Zeldas have, right? I mean, I think even as you're kind of coming up to the end of Link's Awakening, there's like a kind of a a dread that's hanging over that whole experience, right? Because you like you've got the ever-present threat of like whatever you're about to go do in this egg is going to end the universe that you're currently occupying, possibly situation, right?
Existential dread, metaphysical nightmares, etc.
Exactly. But I mean, look, what we're dealing with here is the most classic of all Zelda tropes, right? Which is Zelda is trapped in the castle and we have to go kick some bad guy's ass and save her. And so it's classic and fun in its own way. Hyrule Castle, I have to say, like, it's a really, really fun situation seeing it inverted like this, right? Not inverted in terms of its geography or whatever, but like stylistically, you know, Dark Hyrule Castle, as soon as you walk back out of the elemental sanctuary and you see the purple floors and the green flames. I mean, what's more evil looking than a green flame, I ask you?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nasty. If I ever saw green fire in a sconce, I would be like, I don't think I want to go over there. That just speaks necromancy, dark magic, Voldemort, you know, all those bad things.
Yeah, none of that stuff you want to mess with. But it's fun, right? Because this game and the visual style that it has, it's working with such a rich color palette, you know? And so seeing this familiar location aesthetically inverted like this is a really rich experience, and it's fun walking around in it, and especially getting the full version of the Hyrule Castle theme as we know it from A Link to the Past, right?
Yes, very fun.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just, I think there's something that's nice too about, maybe it's just because Hyrule Castle, the way that it existed in previous parts of the game, felt so bright and cheery. Like it felt like an extension of Hyrule Town, you know? It felt homey, and there's stained glass everywhere, and it was just a very wholesome feeling place. And to see it changed like this is jarring, and I think that there's an impact that they're going for that I felt.
Yeah, no, I think so too, especially like the tone of this game, generally speaking, has always been pretty light and pretty fairy tale, pretty brightly colored, and then going into dark purple, maroon, black, weird green, all of that stuff, and kind of inverting all of that was effective for sure.
Yeah.
It's and the musical cue, especially because the musical cue for Hyrule Castle was really regal and ba 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 every time you enter it, and then just are walking around in it. It was really like, ooh, grandiose. And then this one, like you said, Link to the Past style was definitely different and interesting. So
yeah. Well, and it's a similar thing as what A Link Between Worlds does with its Hyrule Castle, right? Where it's like the first few times you go in there, what you're getting is kind of like a much more upbeat, sort of Baroque, you know, feeling musical theme.
Yeah.
And then once shit falls to pieces, then you get the classic, like, oh, now we're fighting dudes in here.
Yeah. And
sort of theme.
Look, fighting dudes in Hyrule Castle is always fun, in my opinion. I think it's just a cool set piece.
Yeah.
And I think it's well executed in this game. This game's Hyrule Castle dungeon portion, I liked it aesthetically, and I liked the environment and the feel of it. I think it was pretty effective.
Yeah. Talking about Vati a little bit. Because that's what this whole section hinges around, right? Vati is trying to perform a ritual on Zelda by which he's going to extract the light force from her and become a god. And I will say that, so I've got a lot that I want to dig into around that. One kind of point against it, I just want to say, is that I don't feel like we had a moment with Vati where we got any extra expansion of his character here. Like, I feel like that was all sort of saved for the mid-game section where we were just kind of told his motivations and like his origin story and all that.
And really his motivation was, I just want to be powerful. Like,
right.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Sure.
He's like, I'm an evil dude, guys. Y'all gotta trust me. I'm evil.
I just like to do evil things for reasons. Like, okay.
Being evil is cool.
We're the bad guys.
Oh, God, Suicide Squad. Why would you quote that travesty of a movie?
Sorry,
Josh, you were saying something.
Well, I was saying being evil is cool. That's all I said.
Oh, well. Everyone keep an eye on Josh. Everyone over at Zelda Universe. Just
No,
keep
Cody,
Now I'm
Cody
wondering if
knows.
Josh. Yeah.
That's fair.
Although I'm not convinced that Cody's not the one, like the mastermind behind the curtain, who's just just waiting for the right moment to unveil his true nefarious intentions. So the thing is, Josh, if you have an evil form that's half as cool as Vati's evil form, once you actually start the boss fight, then good on you.
Oh yeah, I turn into a giant eyeball all the time.
Cool. Yeah. I'd heard that, and I'm disappointed that I haven't seen it myself in person. The character design for Vati is really seriously freaking cool throughout the entire final boss encounter. And of course, we'll talk about each individual, phase and whatnot once we get there. But there's a lot of different versions of that character that we see in this last little bit, and so that's really fun and cool. Josh, I have a question for you. Are we talking about the Triforce at the end of the game here? Really? I obviously know that it's not called that at any specific point, but like literally the lore of this game turns out to be Zelda is the inheritor. Like her family is passing down an ancient golden power called the Light Force over generations, and Vati is trying to take it from her.
And it's triangle shaped, and the royal family still uses the Triforce as their sigil.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's were they just trying to obliquely talk about the Triforce without actually mentioning the Triforce? It's really if that's not what they're doing, then they're getting really weirdly close to it.
So I think we'd have to go dig in some more. I know I've seen some of the bigger theorists talk about some things like this, that sometimes stuff is lost in translation a little bit, but there are multiple times where you end up with things like Force gems and the Light Force and the Triforce. And so there is some Force that's presumably not the same thing as the Star Wars one that exists in the Zelda universe. But sometimes it's it's a weird, confusing concept, and maybe they've translated some things that in Japan might have been referred to as a force, as not a force here. Maybe vice versa occasionally. And so part of it's just Zelda lore is a mess. Don't even bother. But no, if you follow the backstory is that long ago when evil came, the Picori descended from the heavens and brought with them a sword and a golden light. So this, not Triforce, came from the Picori, who brought it with them to save the Hylians. So the Triforce already exists and presumably is put away, locked in the Sacred Realm, something.
This is the thing, though. It's that story, and this bugged me so much. Especially, it didn't really bug me. It was I didn't feel negatively about it, but I was sitting here trying to connect the threads on my whiteboard, the whole time I was watching the cutscene, the stained glass cutscene. They're talking about, the Picori came down from the sky with a sacred sword and a golden light, and he rid the world of evil, and they made a hero out of it. And I'm sitting here Skyward Sword, you're literally telling me the story of Skyward Sword right now.
Lyndon, I thought you liked it when Zelda was just echoes of things and wasn't a direct correlation to a different game.
I do. I really do love that, but this is just so explicit. I say explicit. It's so close. It's just flirting with the exact version of events that happened in Skyward Sword, and obviously Skyward Sword came way after Minish Cap.
I was about to say,
right?
Or is Skyward Sword flirting Skyward Sword flirting with the Minish Cap story?
What if the hero of men turned out to just be Link in Skyward Sword? That's not what the official lore actually is. The hero of men is just a Link we have not seen. But yeah, this is where we ended up in debates back in the day, trying to figure out where these games placed. And it made more sense in a pre-Skyward Sword world that this was the first Zelda game. Link gets his hat. Maybe that's the Triforce. the origin of it, where it all came from. There's the story that the Minish are the ones that put all the hearts and the rupees in the pots and in the grass or whatever, right? And maybe not in the pots. Maybe the humans are putting them in the pots, but in the grass at least. And so it's like there's all these little things that, like, for a long time it made really solid sense that this was the first game. But like something else we haven't actually said yet in the story is that we go back to the elemental sanctuary and our sword becomes the Four Sword. Is that not this week, or is that?
Yes, So I was going to redirect us.
So
there
it's like,
eventually,
we get a sword, but it's not the Master Sword. It is a totally different sword. And knowing what we know now with Skyward Sword is like the Master Sword is out there, presumably in the sealed temple, still at this point.
Which is also where the Triforce presumably is in the sealed temple grounds. Yeah.
Right.
I think that thought is hilarious, right? It's like, so if we assume that Hyrule Town and Hyrule Castle and whatnot popped up around where the sealed grounds and stuff were in Skyward Sword, right? It means that this whole time that we're like jumping through hoops trying to get the Four Sword, it's like, and the Master Sword
is just over there.
One room over. Yeah.
And the Triforce is on the statue of Hylia, just chilling. Maybe we should go do something with that.
I gotta say, like, when you actually, so now that we actually have the Four Sword, I can talk about this. I love the artwork of the Four Sword. I think it's a really sick looking,
really cool looking
sword. I'm sort of disappointed that we didn't get it as a amiibo drop in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom.
It would have been a really cool one with that golden handle and the ribbon flowing off the end.
Yeah.
Man, this it looks like a cool magical sword you'd get in D&D or something. Like, it's awesome.
Yeah.
You have reminded me, actually, since we're talking about story and all this being confusing, of a little tiny bit of trivia. It's possible that originally it wasn't the Four Sword. In the early release concepts for this game, the logo for the game has the Master Sword in it. For the Minish cap, and before release it was changed to the Four Sword. But the trivia bit is like that actually it was the Master Sword in the logo long enough that even some of the commercials for the game had the Master Sword for a while. So like it might have actually been kind of a late change. At least the graphic for the logo part.
Did Minish Cap come out before the original Four Sword? I know it came out before Four Sword Adventure, but
actually neither of those is true.
Oh, really? It came out
around?
After Four Sword Adventure?
Yes.
About interesting.
6 months-ish after Four Swords Adventures. Four Swords Adventures came out in like the summer of 2004, and the Minish Cap came out at the end of 2004 in Europe and Japan, and then came out in January 2005 in North America. I believe that was the first time really cool. that a Zelda game came out in Europe before North America.
So that makes a lot of sense then that they would just kind of change this to the Four Sword, because like it feels like we're telling the origin story of both Four Sword and Four Sword Adventure, right? Like, oh, this is the prequel of these three little mini adventures that, if I remember correctly, before Hyrule Historia came out, everyone kind of thought Four Sword Minish Cap and Four Sword Adventure happened in their own little like branch pocket universe timeline thing that was totally separate from the mainline Zelda timeline.
Not necessarily pocket. It was just a lot of people would just put all three in a row somewhere. So even a lot of the theorists were like set on there being a split. And I think at some point, Aonuma or Miyamoto, someone had said, oh yeah, it splits at Ocarina of Time to the Wind Waker or to Majora's Mask. There was no downfall, but it split to those two at least. And so everyone will say, oh, well, that makes sense. We can just stick all three of these, on the end of one of these and just get them out of the way. That wasn't where I was, and it's because it contradicted actual information they gave us. But it's sort of, they actually stuck to their word, and I think there were enough people, like even now, you'll get people who are just total skeptics about the timeline. There was never a timeline. Nintendo made the whole thing up just for Hyrule Historia. It never mattered at all. And I don't believe that. I think prior to the Wind Waker especially, the timeline was very straightforward. Like there weren't that many games. It was very clearly Ocarina of Time, and that led into A Link to the Past, which then had Link's Awakening as a sequel, and then Zelda and Zelda 2 at the end. Like it was, they had told us that was just the timeline. They said when Four Swords was being made, there is a quote that Four Swords is the first Zelda game. Which is true in the timeline now. It was before Ocarina of Time. And so knowing that, the Minish Cap just automatically goes before it because you have to forge the Four Sword before you can pull it out of a stone to fight Vati with it.
And you've got to get Vati like changed over to his
eyeball,
non-Minish eyeball form.
So, a lot of people disregarded the Four Sword quote back in the day. I remember arguing with people on the Zelda Universe forums or whatever other forums about it that, that was a throwaway comment. Clearly it changed during development and that's just not true anymore and stuff like that. And it turned out it was exactly what they said it was. So, it's just a matter of there being so many contradictory, weird things in the Zelda story that you can't depend on it. Lots of people got made fun of for saying that Minish Cap was the first game because it's where Link got his hat. And I kind of agree that that's a sort of throwaway detail in the grand scheme of the story, but there's other things like that. We used to argue about all sorts of stuff on forums. Number of people who said that A Link to the Past had to be like at the very end, or at least had to be the very last game in the timeline with the Master Sword because the end of the game said the Master Sword sleeps forever.
Until it doesn't.
Until not.
Yeah.
So, there's a whole world of timeline discourse from the early 2000s. But
so Matt, as a person who holds to the mechanics of the timeline,
yes,
a little bit more than I do, because you were correct. I'm the echoesman in this duo here. I like generalities, and I just love kind of generic echoes of plot points that are roughly similar and all that. Yeah.
Yes.
You're not that way.
No.
How do you feel about all of the like the wrap up of the plot and the greater lore of what's happened in Minish Cap and how similar it is to notable other Zelda games?
Skyward Sword.
Yeah, Sword.
Skyward Sword. Look, I think that Minish Cap's plot is not its necessarily strongest point, but having now been exposed tangentially through discussions to Four Swords Adventure specifically, like we've talked a lot about that game. We haven't talked so much about Four Sword, but like now, and I'm kind of falling in the camp of like putting those three games in a line somewhere between the interminable length of time that is between Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time. Like I'm totally fine with that. I think that's really cool. I think it's fine to have this little side adventure that is still happening within Hyrule. Sure, like you have to explain away like Master Sword, Triforce, where are they, and all these happenings, and like that's fine. Like you can have multiple cool things happening within the same in-world universe without it being like a huge contradiction or a huge like plot hole necessarily. So I really have no issue just plopping this right in between Skyward Sword and Ocarina of Time, and then also saying that the Hero of Men from the original Picori Blade is just a different thing. Like maybe this type of evil needs a different type of magic to fight it, and that's why you're not going for the Master Sword or the Triforce, and that's totally fine with me.
Yeah, well, in some ways. Oh, sorry, Josh.
I pulled up the timeline just to look at it. The latest version that I think was actually published not in Hyrule Historia. They updated it at one of those other books. So they actually have the timeline here with the little events that happen in between games, and it explains, I think, well enough with 4 words where the Master Sword and the Triforce are. So it says there's like the creation, and then Skyward Sword, and then the banishment of the Tweely, and then the sacred realm, and then the sacred realm is sealed. and the kingdom of Hyrule is founded, and then the Minish cap. So the Triforce
that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
In all likelihood here, locked away in the Sacred Realm, presumably with the Master Sword sealing the door of time. And so you would have to open the door of time to, apparently the royal family already has the ocarina or whatever at this point, and it would just be a whole ordeal to open that.
Gotcha.
I'm totally on board with that. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm here for it.
Interesting. I mean, it makes total sense for the banishment of the Twilight to be in that period, because in Twilight Princess it's being talked about as part of the distant past, right? But it's so interesting to think about it as being a plot point that early in the history of Hyrule, right? To see it crop up here.
But remembering back to Lanayru's story about when the Twilight tried to take the Triforce out of the Sacred Realm or whatever, I'm vague on it now. We played that a couple months ago. So it would track that would kind of happen pretty early after the Triforce comes to reside in the land of Hyrule, right? Like that makes a certain amount of sense.
Sure. Well, and you could even, and this is an aside from Minish Cap, this is general timeline now, but you could even say, assuming that the banishment of the Twilight happens prior to the Sacred Realm being sealed, which I think, Josh, you just said that it was, you could assume that the Triforce was sealed in the Sacred Realm as a reaction to the plot by the Twilight to capture it.
Yeah, it's like, okay, these people are not trustworthy, therefore we're going to go ahead and lock all this crap away.
Yeah. Cool. Maybe we shouldn't just leave this sitting on the statue.
Seems like people can't be trusted when there's omnipotent power within their reach. Some people are going to try to abuse that. Maybe we should put that on the top shelf with a child lock on it.
Yeah, I was going to say. And then we have Eslo, who comes and just makes a Triforce
He's
out of a hat.
I made a hat that can do anything. Yeah. And I bet Hylia's up there going, come on, man. We did this already. Why are we doing this again?
But that was just another element of similarity that I thought was hysterical, right? Because in the same conversation we have the golden power that rests with it, the golden force, the light force, not the Triforce, which rests within Zelda, right? And then you've also in the same conversation got the not Triforce wish granting hat
that can do anything apparently.
Right? It's like.
Dude, the deities of Hyrule are just sitting there like banging their head against the palm of their hand. Like, why did we make these people? Why are they like this?
They're just the Brad Pitt smoking a cigarette meme.
Yeah,
right.
Oh no, that's it's not Brad Pitt. It's
Ben
Affleck.
Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck. Yeah, just
exactly. Yeah. But anyway, it's just it's hilarious to me. I do think, very cool. We tied off the plot thread of what's the name of the cap? The wish cap?
It just called it like a magic cap or something.
Okay.
It didn't really have a name. He just said, I made a magical cap.
It's called, I believe it's called the Magician's Cap.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, we tie that up, which is good because apparently Zelda using it in conjunction with the Light Force destroys it. Yeah, which is probably for the best.
We played with the Magician's Cap just a little too hard.
It's called the Mage's Cap.
Okay,
gotcha.
It's for the best that it got destroyed. Let's be honest, and someone should go tell Eslo, please don't do that again. Let's not make omnipotent magical items that can do anything. Let's put some.
But he just loves the Hylians so much. He wanted to gift them something really special.
It seems like a really bad idea. I wouldn't want to give that hat to anybody, even myself.
Yeah.
That's like a monkey's paw waiting to happen.
It's funny, Josh, because earlier you mentioned how cool it is to see Eslo in his restored form here, but it's even funnier because it's not just his restored form. We get to see giant Eslo.
Yeah, he's big. He's big people Eslo.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool. I'm glad we got to see him big people, and then it's really cool to me that he can just turn himself Minish without having to go through one of the portals. Like, I guess Eslo's just a super powerful magician, which is, I guess, tracks with what he created.
Yeah,
so.
Presumably he is the mage referred to in Mage's Cap.
That would make a certain amount of sense.
I think he's got a killer top knot too. I'm looking at concept art of Eslo.
Yeah, but presumably he learned his lesson after making a hat and having his own apprentice turn him into a hat with the hat he made.
Yeah. Hopefully he just goes back to his hut and kind of retires and tinkers with some potions or something.
But that's the thing. I think he feels so bad about this that he sealed himself inside the elemental sanctuary for another 100 years.
No. That's the Minish door.
Yeah,
that's how he gets into the Minish world.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he just went back to
which
Minish
is another similarity
realm
to existing Zelda lore, that there's some alternative universe full of magic, like an alternate sacred realm where magical people live or something. Like, it is sort of Sacred Realm 2 in a way.
Yeah. So, but I guess are we supposed to believe that there's the Society of the Minish that lives in this like alternate world, but then also some just live in Hyrule?
Okay, cool. Sure. I'm down with it. Whatever.
Neat. Yeah.
I guess that's where they all go eventually, because there are no Minish for the rest of the games. They all just all right, see ya.
It's Minish Valinor.
They go across the sea into the west.
On the shores of the sea. Yeah. I will not say, do not weep.
Yeah. For not all tears are evil. Oh, we just watched that movie last night.
It was so good. Oh,
yeah.
man.
Love that movie.
Such a great 4.5 hours. Anyway, yeah. So, anyway, yeah. Got a fun little farewell from Eslo here. And it's nice. You know, I think what we were saying early in the season about companion characters and Eslo kind of ranking higher up on the list, though not necessarily at the top, still sort of holds true for me here at the end of the game.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. He's got a lot of personality, and he was a fun voice to have throughout the entirety of the game, right? Not quite enough going on here to be, you know, dueling with King of Red Lions and Midna and
sure,
those
yeah.
people,
The farewell scene is not nearly as emotional or anything, but I think he's still a great character. I think he's a great companion. I think he added a lot to the game. He got a little fee-ish for me occasionally, but I will say in the final fight with Vati, where he was like, why don't you use some of your gadgets? I'm sitting there like, I'm trying all my gadgets. I'm trying. So, you know, he does get a little fee-ish occasionally, but overall,
Esla's like, hey, maybe you should look in your pack for something, as Matt is throwing a boomerang, a bow and arrow, a bomb.
And using the gas jar. I'm like, what do you want from me?
Like running around the arena with the lantern, just like, I don't know.
Trying to catch the arm in a bottle. Nope, that's not working.
Yeah.
I didn't actually do that, just for the record.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's see here.
I did think it was really interesting that Vati, throughout the whole game, he was saying he doesn't know where the light force is, and he's having everyone search for it. But it seems like he pulls a little bit of a Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time, where he just like lets us do our thing and then piggies back off of it for his evil plan. So I question somewhat.
I just want to stop for a second and say that I love piggies back as an alternative to piggybacks. I'm going to start using that.
You should. It's fun.
It's like the plural of Grand Prix is Grands Prix.
Grands Prix.
Yeah.
Double plural it, just see what happens. English. It's a language.
I'm going to piggies back on that point.
Yeah. Thank you. But he just like totally co-ops our whole thing to make his evil plan work. So I'm questioning if he like actually knew that this was what he needed to be doing the whole time. I don't know. There's a little bit of or a little lack of continuity about what Vati seems to know and be capable of from the rest of the game to the finale, which doesn't like super bother me as all things considered, but it's definitely a thing that I thought about when he like teleported himself into the elemental sanctuary.
In that moment, I was worried that King Daltus just got dead.
Yeah, I was like, oh shoot, did he just like shed Daltus like a meat puppet and his corpse is over there now? Like, that would be really sad.
Daltus is fine.
He's good. He's good.
King Daltus Brohans in Hyrule lives to reign another day.
He doesn't join Gustav Gustafsson Hyrule.
No, he does not.
Why are we this way? Why do people listen to this show?
It's on them at this point.
Honestly.
Yeah. At the end of the game, how do you feel about Eslo, Josh?
Oh, I mean, I think he's one of the better companion characters. Yeah, I mean, he's no Navi.
You mean Navi?
I love Navi though. So yeah, it's like he's not the best, but he's not Fi.
Fee.
He's just baiting you at this point.
I know, and I will take the bait every time.
Yeah, you will. I think we're all pretty much in agreement on this point. I was holding out hope that we would get some kind of big fun Zelda moment.
Yeah,
in here, and we do get a little bit of one, right, where it's like she uses the light force to make things go back to normal. And
I like that she did that instead of Link. Because normally Link is the one who makes the wish on the Triforce, or, that's really it. Makes the wish on the Triforce. But I'm glad Zelda got to put everything back to normal again. That was cool. That was good.
It's the one thing she got to do in the whole game.
Yes.
Yeah. She gave you the shield, Josh.
She took you around to the Picori Festival and showed you all the fun things.
Yeah, it was nice. Speaking of which, I'm looking at concept art from Minish Cap, and it's all awesome. But one of these pieces is of Link fighting a Darknut in Dark Hyrule Castle up against the Vati-fied version of the stained glass window.
Nice.
Really cool piece of concept art. But in that piece of art, Link is holding the mirror shield from Wind Waker. Did I miss that? Is that like acquirable in this game?
The mirror shield is acquirable. I did not get it, and I have no idea how to get it.
So I was going to bring this up in Bloopy Trails to see if anybody got it.
I know that the mirror shield is a thing because I was trying to get rid of rupees by buying the Swiftblade magazine things that you can buy at the post office. And the second one says that there's a magical boomerang and a mirror shield that are able to be obtained within the game. And I got neither of them. And I was like, I thought the mirror shield would be the item in Dark Hyrule Castle, and I was wrong.
I got the magical boomerang.
I was going to say, you got neither of them. Yeah, the magical boomerang is pretty simple to get, actually.
Yeah, I just refused to interact with Tingle. That's why I didn't get it.
I mean, all right. So, because that's why I think I warned Cody about it, or made fun of Cody about it when he was here, because he had wasted his money buying the normal boomerang, and because it was just like, by the time the boomerang's available in the store, you can just fuse kinstones with 4 people and get the magical one for free. But
I also bought the boomerang just because I needed to waste rupees.
Technically Bloopy Trail, but Mirror Shield, here we go. Y'all both just beat the game this evening, right?
Yes.
You got to turn your game back on. You cannot obtain the Mirror Shield until after you defeat Vati.
What?
Whoa.
What?
It comes from Bigoron. Up on the mountain, you have to fuse. I don't know if it's a random kinstone or red kinstone. Pull up Zelda Wiki and look at the kinstones. There's a kinstone fusion that activates Bigoron. After you beat Vati, when you're deciding that you're crazy and you want to finish every kinstone fusion, or more crazy and that you want to do all the figurines, you go back up the mountain, and if you talk to Bigoron, he'll be like, "Gee, man, that shield sure does look tasty. Would you mind if I munch on it for a while?" And he will chew up your shield and then spit back out a mirror shield for you.
What?
It is a completely optional item. It does reflect magical attacks, so it can make... if you decide to go fight Vati again, go back to the castle, it can make some of that easier than it was before, but otherwise it is not necessary at all. It is, unfortunately, the last appearance of the Mirror Shield in the series.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty sure that's still correct, right? Like, we got mirrors in... we got mirrors in the kingdom, but not mirror shields unless you fuse your own mirror shield.
Yeah. No,
wow.
I think
That's insane.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So
And also sad. I love the mirror shield.
yeah,
I
it's
wish
one
it
of
was
my
around
favorite.
more often.
One of my absolute favorite items. Other fun trivia: y'all might not know the mirror shield actually originates in Kid Icarus, not in Zelda.
Huh.
So
Interesting.
it's one of Pit's. In fact, in Smash Brothers, he has it. It's yeah, like in the newest version, in the newest Smash Brothers, they gave him more of like a magical shield. But originally, when they put him in, he literally just had a mirror shield he plopped on the ground. And in the first Kid Icarus game, it's one of your ultimate weapons.
Which is funny because the first appearance of the mirror shield in a Zelda game came in Link's Awakening, which was full of references
A Link to the
to
Past.
other Nintendo games.
A Link to the Past.
Was it in Link to the Past?
Turtle Rock.
It was? I don't remember it being in Link to the Past.
You're
Turtle
right.
Rock.
You're right. It's in crap. You get it in the last.
Yeah,
one, I
in
think.
Turtle, you get it in Turtle Rock, and you have to use it to block lasers that are shooting at you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it's the first time.
Can I
it's
just say
really
how weird it is to
useful
me?
Is Link's Awakening.
Can I just say how weird it is to me that Zelda is a game full of lasers? There are lots of enemies that have lasers for a fantasy game. It's a sci-fi thing that is just rampant within this fantasy world.
Early concepts
Interesting.
for The Legend of Zelda, the Triforce were like microchips, computer chips.
What?
They've talked about.
I did not.
They've talked about like they did alien invasions in Majora's Mask. They've talked about more bigger alien invasions as concepts. You can find them in some of the concept books. I don't remember which. I've got all the textbooks they released, and I don't remember what's in any of them. There's a bunch of concept art of like they have played with what if Zelda was more sci-fi since the very beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would like that. I leaning.
Well, they
towards
did
not
it.
really.
They did it in Breath of the Wild.
It's true.
Cue the
Fair.
Cue the Dr. Evil lasers.
I
sound
just
drop here.
want sharks with freaking laser beams attached to their heads.
So yeah, the mirror shield is one of the missable items that y'all were talking about. It's just missable because most people beat the game and then they stop playing.
Which,
How dare they?
a normal person would do, yeah, unless you're playing Breath of the Wild.
So yeah, it's but very not necessary, but it is there.
So, do we have anything else we want to say about the wrap up to the game from a plot standpoint?
The plot to steal the light force from Zelda is very reminiscent of Demise's plot to suck the divine spirit out of Zelda. Like as Zvati was talking about, I'm completing a ritual to steal the light force from the princess. I'm like, oh, you mean like how Demise used the spirit of Hylia to resurrect himself in Skyward Sword? Okay, cool. I'm there. Yeah, I'm seeing this through line of we're gonna absorb Zelda's life essence or divine essence or whatever, and cool. Yeah, reuse the trope. Yes,
Maybe if
Thumbs
Ati had done a cool dance, then he would have.
like Girahim. Yeah.
Which is hysterical because I know in the early lead up to Skyward Sword, when art for Girahim was revealed and we didn't really know much about him, a lot of people were theorizing if there was some connection to Vati, just because there's some artificial, there's some superficial similarities to the design of the characters.
The gray skin and the red eyes, although Girahim doesn't have red eyes, but yeah, the gray skin, the kind of flamboyant dress. Yeah, I can see that a little bit. Sure.
Okay, cool. Josh, you have anything else you want to say about the tie up to the plot before we move on to Dungeon Map?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's go ahead and get into part 3, which is the dungeon map, where we talk about this week's dungeon. From mechanics to music and more, this week's dungeon is Dark Hyrule Castle. And these are always interesting because I think with certain notable exceptions, we never feel too particularly good about final dungeons in Zelda games.
They're normally pretty subpar. Yeah.
They tend to drop the ball a little bit. just going to say it up front. I think that this is one of the exceptions to that rule.
I think this is potentially the second or third best final dungeon in a Zelda game.
It's up there. It's really up there. And there's really a lot that goes into that, right? I mean, and that's even without us having an item to get in this dungeon, right? There's no new item. There's no new mechanics that go along with it, unless you count the fact that you're now able to split into 4 copies instead of
I think
just
that's the
3.
new mechanic.
Yeah. But I think even without a new item to get a hold of here, the thing that this dungeon has going for it is, to my mind, one, an excellent balance of puzzles and combat. There's a lot of both. There's a more than fair amount of combat in here, and a lot of it is actually fairly challenging, right? But also the dungeon itself is just big. Like it's not a bite-sized experience, right? This took me just as long to get through as any of the other dungeons in this game, which I really appreciate. Josh, how do you feel about Dark Hyrule Castle?
No, I agree. I think that I feel like maybe that I think the combat outweighs the puzzles in a large way, and maybe I have to fight like 6 too many dark nuts. But
there are a ton of dark nuts in this dungeon. A ton.
Overall, I do very much like this dungeon as a final dungeon. I think it's one of the better ones in the series.
So I'm gonna go ahead and do the summary of Dark Hyrule Castle real quick. Basically, the entire dungeon kicks off once you fuse the final element into the Four Sword. You leave the Elemental Sanctuary. You come out in the basement of Dark Hyrule Castle, which has been transformed, like we mentioned earlier. The castle itself is split up into a rearranged version of the main floors and basement that we've been exploring for this entire game up until this point, leading to new upper floors. There's kind of a middle upper floor, which has a dense cluster of rooms. And basically that middle upper floor is all concerned with you getting the boss key and going up another floor to get to Vati. But in order to kind of traverse this middle floor, you've got to do a lot of skirting around the outside of the castle via wind cyclones. Once you get inside, it's kind of a maze of rooms that you kind of have to progress through in a ascending fashion, right? As you unlock them, you can go further and further, all leading up to the puzzle where you've got to unlock 4 key blocks in order to get to the boss key. In order to get those 4 keys, you have to do battle with no less than like 10 dark nuts. And, you know, beating a room full of dark nuts will lead you to one of the 4 keys. Once you get all those unlocked, you get the boss key and you're able to go up to the very top floor. This is where we kind of kick off the, oh crap, shit's about to go down moment where, you know, they say there's 3 rings of the bell, and at the 3rd ring, Vati will have completed his ritual. And that's kind of the mad rush to the final boss encounter. So yeah, it's, you know, in some ways that middle upper floor reminds me a lot of the of Death Mountain in Zelda 1, right? It's not nearly as confusing, and it doesn't have superfluous rooms the way that dungeon does. But it's just dense. It's packed so tight, full of rooms and spaces and stuff, that it just sort of reminded me a little bit of that. Let's do a little prompt here. What do you think, like in your mind, what makes a good final Zelda dungeon, and what causes some of the more disappointing ones to be disappointing? Like what are the qualifiers for a good time? In one of these?
I mostly just want another dungeon. That's the thing. It's like here, I think that this dungeon, it does make you, it's got enough puzzles and makes you use some of your old items, which is a nice like bring it all together moment. Which some of the other final dungeons do okay. I would say like Ocarina of Time is maybe okay at that, since it's got thematic rooms where you kind of have to play the Fire Temple again for 5 minutes. And so like I like getting that out of a final dungeon, but otherwise like I love Ganon's Tower in Link to the Past. It's just a big dungeon. And you know, that one, the kind of the theme is refight some of the bosses that you already fought. But here, that's kind of what you have. Like there's a couple puzzles in here that actually get me stumped, even though I have done them over and over. There's one room in particular that you have to bomb some cracked blocks with that I forget the solution to every time I do it.
I got hung up for about 5 or 10 minutes in that room because I was trying lots of trickety trick ways to bomb those rocks.
Yeah, and you just use the gust jar.
Yeah,
and I know that now, but I feel like I'll forget it by the time I play this again.
But I was trying everything, right? Like I was trying to put bombs on the moving platform.
Yeah.
That wasn't working. I was trying to like throw bombs across the chasm at the perfect timing, right? So that it was like, so maybe if I can time it to where the bomb explodes before it falls in the chasm, then maybe that's the solution, right? None of that's working. And it really is just the gust jar, which is great. Like it's exactly what you're talking about, right? It's pulling one of the early game items back into the experience. And kind of, it's forcing you to think about like what items do I have and what do they all do and what might work here.
Yeah, and so I think the other thing is to have another dungeon. This also has to be I feel like Final Dungeon should be the pinnacle dungeon, right? Like you're coming to the finale of the game. You want to leave it on the highest note you can. And to me, that is having a great combination of large explorable space, good puzzles, and engaging combat. And I really think that the Dark Hyrule Castle does all three of those things pretty well. There was also the puzzle where you go into the room full of what are they? The ones that steal your rupees.
I don't know the name of those guys. Hold on. The fox-looking dudes.
Ketons is what they're called.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, you go into the room full of Ketons, and you just have to use your sword to poke at the wall to find the bombable spot, which I hate. I hate that puzzle, generally speaking, but the layout of the dungeon was such that there was nowhere else to go, and luckily I had played A Link to the Past. It was over a year ago at this point, but now that's ingrained in me as a Zelda player of when I'm playing a top-down game, look for the bombable wall by hitting the wall with your sword.
Yeah.
So like it does things like that where it utilizes your whole knowledge of this game and Zelda in general to create a unique dungeon experience that tests your limits. And I think that is excellent. One of the puzzles that really, really stumped me was actually opening up that room with all the Ketons in it, where you have to deflect the four cross-shooting cannonballs at the same time, and like getting the timing right, getting the spacing right on your duplicates. All of that was incredibly challenging, and I thought this dungeon really pushed me to the limit of what I've done in this game and in Zelda in general. I thought it was really well done.
I will say that bombable wall tripped me up for a few minutes too. If you were paying attention, you could actually see the other side of that bombable wall from
a different room. Yes.
Well, yeah. So you come to that room early in the dungeon, and you can kind of look across the room and see that other wall, right?
Yep.
But I mean, it's like you really have to be committing a lot of those small details to memory in order to get everything on the first go. It's not unfair to the point where the wall looks like a regular wall from both sides.
Right.
Like the hint was there for you if you were paying attention. And to me, that makes it completely fair game, right? Like
sure.
It's totally 100% an appropriate puzzle that's not overly frustrating.
And I didn't remember that room and that wall. Like I had thought about it when I saw it, and I was like, oh, that's important later. But then by the time I got over there, after sitting on the reflect the four cannonballs simultaneously for like 20 minutes, it was like 20 minutes.
It was hard.
It was really hard. I had forgotten it by that point. So I actually backtracked all the way through the dungeon, got to that room, saw the wall, and then looked at my dungeon map and I was like, oh, those rooms are connected. Then I went back and started, mining the wall with my sword to find the right spot. So like, yeah, you're right. It is a very much like, hey, remember this thing. This is important later kind of puzzle.
Yeah. All those things you're talking about stump me. A lot of times I forget about the spot in the wall and I backtrack through the whole dungeon. And it's like, we haven't really talked about my history with this game. I have played this game many, many times, right? And I still get stuck on it. It's amazing the number of times I get to that dead end room and I immediately I'm like, oh yeah, I have to bomb the wall. And then I put a bomb in the middle of the wall, just like you would sort of expect, and nothing happens. And I'm like, I guess that's not what you do. And then I leave.
Yep. Right between the two sconces of green fire, right? That's where I put it. And I was like, all right, well, that didn't work.
Got to go lower. Yeah. So I committed a bad pod infraction, Josh. And
Did you look up a guide?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I forgot to ask Josh about his history with the game at the top of the episode, because this is the first time that he's been on this season, and I usually do that. But I'm used to Josh showing up on the
multiple
show
times a season.
Multiple times a season, right? So that's my bad.
But no, we can talk about it toward the end. It makes more sense, I think, maybe. But it can be part 43 or whatever number Cody has.
I don't have any Australia facts tonight, so we've got at least that one open. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think everything that we're saying is spot on for me, right? Like, this dungeon feels like the exact correct combination of things that I want out of just any dungeon experience in a Zelda game. And the fact that it's happening in the final dungeon is just sort of icing on the cake, right? Because that helps you to be having the maximum amount of fun that you can be having going into the final experience. Like, it just sets a really fun tone and mood going into the final fight. And the fact that it's even a bit more difficult in some of its attention to detail puzzle arrangement, right? Just feels earned, because it should, right? You should be straining a little bit in this very, like, you've got the culmination of all the knowledge from the entire rest of the game, right? And you should be required to call on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh man, I had a thought. Hold on, it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, that's a silly little stick insect. Sorry, that was a Radagast from The Hobbit joke.
I was trying to place it. I was like, where's he going?
Radagast from The Hobbit. Sorry.
Okay.
Dang it. I think I lost it. Oh, no, there it is. I also really appreciate...
You found the stick insect.
I did. I found it. I really appreciate how this dungeon resupplies you on a regular basis. There is the room that's got a train of anti-fairies where you can refill your hearts as many times as you need to when you're fighting the Dark Nuts. I went back to that room with the anti-fairy train like at least 3 times and just refilled all my hearts. There's a room directly adjacent from the entrance to the Elemental Sanctuary where you can get 2 fairies, 10 arrows, and 10 bombs. I was refilling my arrows and bombs constantly. Like, this dungeon does a really good job of eliminating a very frustrating thing that some dungeons do, especially in the older Zelda games, which is famine economy. And so it really doesn't have the famine economy, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, it does this thing where it's really good at taking away your hearts. Is what this
dude, I was absolutely trucking through Lon Milk and fairies like nobody's business. It was pretty intense.
So what's your strategy for fighting Dark Nuts?
So it sort of evolved as I was going through the dungeon. I would, obviously when it's just one, I'm doing just
shield and sword.
Shield and sword, roll and swipe, doing that whole thing. Once you start having 2 or 3 Dark Nuts in a space,
bombs.
Bombs are really good. I was actually also using the Rock's Cape a lot to like jump behind them.
Yep.
Ooh, I never tried that. That's smart.
It is smart. I always forget about it, and I pretty much just stick with the sword and shield the whole time, which I think works really well, actually. But yeah, it's like every time when I'm done, I'm like, man, there has to be a better way to do this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I have a whole arsenal of stuff I could have been using.
So in the rooms that had 2 Dark Nuts, they're not smart AIs. They'll actually get themselves stuck on those pillars. And they'll just try to hit you through the pillar. So I would drop 2 bombs on one side of the pillar, run to the other side, and they would just be stuck there trying to hit me. And both bombs would blow up and damage and stun them. And then I'd go in and swing a little bit, move to the other side of the room and do it again. Like, I went through at least 100 bombs fighting all 5 million of these Dark Nuts. Like, I was just bombing everything, man. It was an effective strategy for sure. So
yeah.
All right, I have one more question.
Yes.
Did anyone run out of time?
Can you run out of time? Can you hit that 3rd bell?
Yes. It's not imaginary.
Oh, I did not hit the 3rd bell.
Imaginary.
Wow, I thought it was imaginary. I did not run out of time.
Yeah, you can't
Do you
see
just
the
get
timer. Yeah, you just lose.
Do you just get auto gamed over?
Yep, you just lose.
Okay.
Wow.
So that
like
fight
that.
against the Dark Nuts is actually if you know there's a timer, once you know there's a timer, it's way more stressful because you're like, oh, I gotta go fast. When you don't know there's a timer, you're just kind of playing it when you just think it's imaginary dialogue.
Yeah.
So I've ruined future
so-
playthroughs for you now.
I'm happy to hear that that's the case because I was gonna bring up the point that I appreciated the frantic feeling that you have going into the 3 bell section.
Yeah.
And I was just assuming that there was no timer, and I was just kind of putting the frantic mad rush quality
On
into
yourself.
on myself, right? But I'm glad to know that that's the case. Like I appreciate that because I feel like it would have just been very easy to dialogue saying like, hey, you got to move quick, 3 bells and things are done, right? But no actual consequences could come out of that. Do you have any idea what the timer is?
I don't.
how
I'm
long you
sure I
have?
could look it up. The first 2 bells are not timed. Like that is very like you just walk through the doors and it says, "Oh, the second bell happened," and "Oh, the third." But as soon as the 3rd bell happens, when you're fighting the Dark Nuts, so you're only really timed fighting the Dark Nuts. But the other rooms are not complicated. So, especially if you've bothered getting any kind of sword skills, if you've got sword beams or something, once you duplicate yourself 4 times and just shoot a bunch of beams to a room.
Yeah.
But let's see.
I will say that one of the hardest things about the dungeon was I went into the first round of Vati fight with like 5 hearts left.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh boy, this is gonna be very difficult.
Before we talk about Vati, one other type of puzzle that happens twice in this dungeon that I do want to discuss is the colored floor tiles puzzles.
Ooh, I love those puzzles.
I do too.
Yeah, those are so much fun.
Yeah.
Did you have trouble with them, or did you get them very quickly?
The first one I got on the first try.
Yep.
The second one took me 3 tries.
I got it in 2. I really like those types of puzzles where you have to map it out in your mind first and do it. I think those are clever puzzles.
Well, and I was thinking about it because I agree. Like I enjoy that quality to them, but the immediate next thought that I had coming off of that was, well, I said that was one thing that I didn't like about sliding ice block puzzles, right? The difference is these puzzle rooms have this awesome thing where they give you a switch in the room to auto reset if you get it wrong. Like
yes,
you don't have to leave the room and come back and then try it again. It's a little thing, but it really does make a lot of difference to me.
I agree completely.
Do we have anything else we want to say about the dungeon proper before we go talk about the Vati fight?
No, I don't think so. Let's talk about Vati.
I do have one more thing.
Okay.
Fake key doors.
Bomb them. Blow them up.
Well, yeah, but it's like there's no way to tell they're fake when you're just like walking around, you know?
I guess that's fair.
I mean, I don't hate it. I thought it was hysterical.
I think
right?
it's funny.
Like,
yeah, I think it's funny. It's like mimics in Baldur's Gate 3, which I know you don't know, Lyndon, but they're treasure chests that aren't treasure chests, and they try to eat you when you try to open them.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
It's like that.
Wow. Sorry. I always forget that y'all don't play like JRPGs, and some of these things that I've known since I was like 6 are just like new concepts to you. It's like having to explain what a mimic is. I'm like, that was in the first RPG I ever played.
It is a huge old gap in our knowledge, but that's why we bring you on the show.
Yeah, basically, you should just expect any JRPG, even Super Mario RPG has them, that there are treasure chests that are not treasure chests, and they will try to eat you.
I mean, even Ocarina of Time has those. They don't try to eat you; they just freeze you, like in the Spirit Temple in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
they just
in the Fire Temple in Ocarina of Time too. You've got the doors that try to smoosh you, right? Yeah, but you can kind of tell that those aren't real doors.
Yeah, because they
set out
don't
from the
flush
wall
with the wall. Yeah, they're not flush. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the Vati fight, which, goddamn, Vati kicked my ass. I'm not ashamed to say I definitely took my licks in this one, and it was a very difficult final boss fight to me. yeah, a lot of it comes down to there's some slight bullet hell mechanics at play at various stages of the encounter. Actually, kind of at all stages of the encounter, honestly. But yeah, I mean, how many different phases? There's are there 3 or 4? There's 3.
There are 3.
Okay. So yeah. So phase 1 Vati fight is just like Uber Vati, right? He becomes like a bigger badass version of himself that floats around the room. He's got those little guardian eyeballs that you have to destroy, and then that opens up his main eye, of course, and then you have to do damage to that. After that one, he transforms into medium-sized eye Vati, where he's surrounded by these orbs, and you have to do damage to the orbs with arrows. And so there's how many are there? There are 8 orbs that float around him, and you have to figure out which 4 are the ones that you've got to damage. And once you know which 4 are damageable, then you have to duplicate yourself in that same pattern and do damage to them, and then you can damage medium eye Vati. So after that phase, you think that you've destroyed him. You unfreeze Zelda. You escape the castle together. Let's see where.
Into the elemental sanctuary.
Yeah, into the elemental sanctuary, and then Uber Eye Vati. It's like he has his "Hey bitch, I lived" moment, right? And then he becomes Uber Eye Vati with 2 giant arms coming off of his sides. And what you've got to do in this section is he shoots these projectiles. You have to duplicate yourself into a perfect row of 4, and then you have to deflect the projectiles back at 4 little orbs in front of him. All 4 have to hit, and then if that works, then he becomes damageable. The actual beginning phase of that fight is you have to destroy his arms by going inside of them and destroying some dudes in there. Once you've blown up each of his arms, then you move into the final phase. So let's go ahead and start our conversation by talking about phase 1, which is crazy evil mage Vati. Josh, how do you feel about this one?
Oh, I actually really like this fight because it requires that you use the Gust Jar, which is interesting. I love the fight in general, all the phases, because you kind of use your arsenal. But no, I like this fight because of that. And then it's also a nice throwback to The Legend of Zelda for me. The fight is reminiscent of Patra.
I'm trying to remember.
That is the floating eyeballs that have bunches of little eyeballs surrounding them.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure.
In Death Mountain in The Legend of Zelda. Patra is one of the only enemies that kind of just doesn't show up. Most of those enemies in the original Zelda are just kind of staples of the series now. And
Gleeok, Aquamentus, all
like,
those. Yeah.
Like Aquamentus has only shown up a couple times, but Patra has appeared once. Only in one game ever. And so we get things like this that are reminiscent of, but that's as close as we get. And so I like that there's this little bit of throwback to it.
Yeah. So this one was fun for me as well. For one, like I said earlier, I really like the character art of this phase of Vati. I mean, he basically just looks like some crazy uber Minish. Like he's fully capitalizing on his claim that he's the ultimate sorcerer of the world here. And I was a little bit confused about the most optimal way to beat it for a few reasons. The main one is that when you destroy the little eyeballs, or maybe it's the pots. Maybe the pots give you arrows. Either way, you're given arrows as drops in this room.
Dude, were you shooting his eye with your own arrow?
And it was taking forever.
Yeah, I was even using the light arrows, and it still was just like not doing a ton of damage. And so it took me a while to figure out that I could just run up and slash him with my sword.
Yeah. Yeah. And it gets more and more frantic as it goes, right? Because as you get further into the fight, he starts teleporting more often during his damage phase. His little eyeball minions start getting those shields.
That you have to Gust Jar
Gust Jar off, which was nice because after I died midway through phase 2 and then had to go back and start it all over. And when I say start it all over, I mean all of it, like from the bell section.
Oh boy, that's rough.
Yeah. it's a slog. Like if you're really having trouble at any phase of Vati, then you're just constantly getting kicked back to the very beginning and having to redo a lot of stuff.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't game over against Vati.
But what was nice was knowing that I had to use the Gust Jar to remove that black evil energy from around the eye minions. I knew that I could use the Gust Jar earlier in the fight to just get rid of the ones that follow you around for a little bit. So yeah,
I just dodged those for a while.
Yeah. So that's what I did. He shoots a lot of fireballs at you, and I don't think we've talked about this at all in this season so far, but fireballs in Minish don't just burn and damage you. They also make it impossible for you to swing your sword, and you're just like running at double speed around the arena until the fire goes out.
Yeah, you're going real hard.
Did this not come up during the episode for the Cave of Flames?
We haven't talked about it, no.
Huh. Yeah, like I listened to that episode, but I just don't remember. Because, yeah, that's what makes that fight annoying. If you start getting hit by the fire, you'll just end up in a vicious cycle of falling in the lava.
Right. But no, I mean, I overall really, really fun first phase. I mean, none of the Vati phases are pushovers at all, right? I mean, and especially the eye minions, they don't rotate around him on a fixed plane, right? Like they kind of like the circle that they make expands and contracts. So you really got to be paying attention. Otherwise, you're just going to be getting hit a lot.
Right. And they stop and shoot lasers. So you can't even like, sometimes if you just try and stand in a spot to wait for them, it won't work. And then you find yourself in trouble because you stopped moving.
Yeah, the aforementioned lasers. Yes, they make a reappearance here.
So, yeah, I don't. Maybe I just didn't hear it, but you know that his forms all have names.
Oh, do they? I didn't know that.
Majora has. So this is Vati Reborn.
Okay,
that's the first phase. You can learn this by turning on the game again after you beat it and going back to the figurine gallery to get your new figurines.
There's a 50% chance. There's a 50% chance that I go back and get the mirror shield. There's a 0% chance that I go back to do anything with the figurines.
0 things with the figurines.
Man, you're never going to 100% this game.
No. Yeah. I'm not going to 100% this game if it has to do with figurines.
I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight.
Yeah, it's just you're going to be missing that last heart container forever.
Womp womp.
Worst piece of heart in the entire series. That's the reward of a piece of heart. That's not the only reward, but it's the only reward anyone cares about.
Yeah. So now I'm looking at the walkthrough and I'm seeing that you're correct. Phase 2 is called Vati Transfigured, and this is what I was calling medium eye Vati. And this phase was a ton of fun, honestly. Like I this might have been my favorite phase of the whole fight, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not too terribly difficult to avoid Vati. Like you have to be careful. You know, he'll bump into you and you'll get hit by the spike traps.
I'm really glad he doesn't damage you when he bumps into you in this phase.
Yeah. He bounces you around though, and he can like knock you into some of the spike traps and stuff. The bigger thing that you have to really manage here is once you have the orbs turned to red and you know what pattern you have to attack them in, and you get on the duplication pads and you've made copies of yourself, you're just having to try really hard not to let any of your copies get hit by rocks or spike traps or anything, because then you have to like do the whole thing over again. So yeah, but the nice thing is that if you destroy the spike traps in here, they are refilling arrows for you. So if you're using a lot of arrows trying to shoot the orbs to turn them red, then there is a way to replenish them, which I do appreciate. Matt, how'd you feel about this phase?
Yeah, no, I like all 3 phases quite a lot. I liked this one. It's appropriately fast-paced, frantic. You're doing a lot of different things. You're really moving through the main mechanics of the game, and you're utilizing them uniquely, like you did on the Gaiorg fight, which is really fun. I really. Yeah, I just really like Vati as a boss. Like, he's so unique. He's so different from any other final Zelda boss that you're not doing Dead Man's Volley. You're not doing, I mean, you're kind of doing
I was
Dead
about to
Man's
say
Volley at the very end. Like, yeah, sort of. But like, he's so unique, and I love that. I think the second phase is a lot of fun. The spike traps. I really appreciate that the sword swings from your replicants will destroy the spike traps, so you can just kind of swing your sword to clear a path for yourself. I didn't have any particular difficulty with this phase. This is the phase I lost the least amount of hearts on by far. And that was kind of nice.
You know the thing about replicants, Matt?
Something Blade Runner.
They're like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard. If they're a benefit, it's not my problem.
Yeah, so like I said, something Blade Runner. Hey, I think that's our first Blade Runner reference.
Might be.
But anyway, I think that this phase is a lot of fun, and I think it's the easiest one in my opinion. But still enjoyable.
It's the one where you're able to take your time the most.
Yes,
yeah,
I would agree with that.
I think it's the one that, like, all three phases require using different items in your arsenal, right? But I think this is the phase that doesn't take very long to figure out what you're supposed to do. It's a little bit more obvious how to solve it, and that kind of alone just makes it easier, because, like, in the first phase, even, you can get stuck for a few minutes if you're like, well, how do I get these black balls off of the eyeballs? Like, why is it impervious to damage all of a sudden? And you might sit around for a while trying to figure out how to fix it. And the third phase is more notorious for figuring out how to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, and to Matt's point, he mentioned the Gyorg fight, and you have the benefit of having just done that also, right? So it's kind of still fresh in the memory.
Right. And yeah, like this one, the solution is hit it with arrows and then split up. So it's just a simpler phase, but I really like this fight.
Yeah, and I think benefit to all of us for being veteran Zelda players, which is arrows plus eyeballs is generally bad combo for generally bad combo for bad guy. So like that was where my brain went to immediately. So much so that it really hurt me in the first phase of Vati Reborn or whatever it was, like we mentioned just a little bit ago. But so that did not stump me at all. And I guess I got lucky, for the first round. The first 4 eyes that I hit all turned red. So it threw me for a little bit of a loop when the second round I was hitting eyes that then turned blue. And I was like, oh, wait, am I supposed to use a different item? But eventually I started hitting the correct eyeballs that turned red. And that was for the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about phase 3 now, which is, and granted, again, we have the interstitial here, which is where we free Zelda, we escape back down to where the elemental sanctuary
Did y'all refill your arrows, hearts, and bottles with fairies?
I didn't realize you could get back to that area of the castle.
I checked it out because I had like 3 hearts left.
I wish like hell that I did.
So I had 3 hearts left. So I had 3 hearts left, so I went immediately to that room, refilled all my hearts, and filled all my bottles with fairies, because I was like, I am not game overing on phase 3 of Vati. That's not happening. So,
well, remember, Matt, you had access to a rewind function here.
Mm-hmm.
I actually totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
I never used it a single time.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, fair enough.
So phase 3 is called Vati's Wrath, a much more direct callback to Majora's Mask's final boss fight, right? So this is the one where you've got big ball arm attached to giant eyeball, right?
And this eyeball is the form of Vati that shows up in the both 4 sword games, right? Is that right, Josh?
It is
giant
closer
eyeball.
to, yes. Like, they all have little differences to them, but yes. Like, the armored eyeball is very much what's in Four Swords. Four Swords Adventures, I don't know that there's an armored form. He might just be the big shadowy eyeball in Four Swords Adventures, but it's been a couple of years since I have beaten that game.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Cool. So I will say I spent a few minutes and a lot of hearts screwing around in the first part of this fight trying to figure out what to do.
Yes.
Because it's so tough. Like, he's completely impervious to anything that you're doing. His arms are coming out of the ground attacking you, right? With no clear markers to denote what item you're supposed to be using on them.
Yep.
And it's really, really difficult. And the only thing you really have to go on is that Eslo comes in with a fee moment and says, maybe you should try using one of your items on these things. And so at that point, what you're doing is just like, okay, let's equip everything and see what works here.
And of course, the very last thing you equip is the Cane of Pachi.
Right, yeah.
Why would you think, of all the items you have, why would the Cane of Pachi be the one that works here? That makes no sense at all, because it doesn't turn the arm upside down. All it does is make it go rigid. Like, you would think the boomerang would do that, because the boomerang stuns things.
But that's an optional item.
Yeah. You're right. I tried to gust jar this thing. I tried to bomb it. I hopped over it with the Rocks Cape to see if I could, like, confuse it. I threw the boomerang at it. What else did I do?
That was light it on fire with the lantern.
I did not try to light it on fire. I did those couple of things before I finally got around to the Cane of Pachi in just desperation of, I haven't tried this one yet. So I did.
This reminded me of the blob form of the nightmare at the end of Link's Awakening, where you have no idea what you're supposed to do to it, and it's just like, oh, magic powder. Okay. Like,
sure, why not?
Yeah. So the way that you do this is you hit one of the arms when it comes out of the ground with the Cane of Pachi. That freezes it in place and opens a doorway. You can shrink to Minish form and go inside of it, and then it's got little evil blobs that are in there. You kill one of them, and then the arm blows up. You
kill the one, and this confused me, actually. You have to kill the one whose eye is following your movements instead of the ones whose eyes are stationary. That's how you denote which one you have to attack.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because that confused me for a bit. But yeah, once you do that, you blow up both arms. And the second arm you go in, you do have to use your lantern to light up the space. But once both arms are dead, that's when you get Electric Ball, Fury, and Dead Man's Volley ×4, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. It's this second phase of this fight was so frantic for me, and I was down. I did not come in here with enough Lon Milk Fairies, whatever. Like, I was down to 1 heart for this entire thing.
Yikes, dude!
It was really tough, and it was fun. The mechanics are very fun. They're appropriately difficult. Like, I had a really good time with it. Here's the thing: if you do this phase of the fight with either full hearts or just 1 heart, you're making it so freaking difficult for yourself. If you have the 2 beam attacks, if you have the peril beam and then the other one, right? If your sword is shooting beams when you have either 1 heart or full hearts, what happens is when you try to deflect the row of projectiles back, your beam will destroy one from your main copy before it gets to you.
That is obnoxious.
It was such a pain in the ass. Like, you have to time it exactly perfectly so that you're hitting the ball with your sword and not with the sword beam. And it messed me up so much. Like, it was such a freaking pain in the butt. And I'm curious, I don't know, like, it's such a specific scenario to where you would even have to worry about that, but that's what I was living, right? I had 1 heart, so I'm just shooting beams.
Yeah,
you know?
I did not have that because I was not at 1 heart and I was not at full hearts, so I never had that particular difficulty. I was having a weird thing where if you're too close to the eyeballs, one of them will hit before the other ones, and then it won't work. Because like, the eyes aren't in a straight line. They're kind of offset a little bit, specifically the 2 on the ends. So you have to be at a certain distance back for them to hit all at the same time.
Yeah.
So that was one kind of weird quirk
particular
that I had
about it. The number of I have sat here for like 10 minutes doing this many times, just like ready to just throw the controller or whatever, because I'm hitting 3 of them and one of them's just shooting off to the side somewhere. So yeah, it is very, very particular about how you how you reflect the 4 beams back.
How do you feel about this phase of the fight, Josh?
Oh, I like it. I think it's a really cool, like, difficult final boss fight. Like, very, very fitting. Like, it's hard for me to evaluate this fight, like, objectively, because I have played it so many times. Like, I frequently play this game for the Zelda Universe Charity Marathon. So I have practiced finishing it very quickly. I'm not even really speed running it. It's like I can finish it in 6 hours, which is not an impressive speed run, right? But like, so I've done it lots of times just practicing, and even then it's just like sometimes you just get stuck in a loop where you just cannot get it done. But it's hard for me to say it objectively because, like, I haven't been stuck on the Kanapachi part in 20 years. Like, I might have got stuck the first time I did it, and then it was just like, oh yeah. So to me, all of that's just going through the motions. It's just this part of the fight is the only part that's like, that's not based on just knowing what item to use. It's like, you know how to do it, but it's actually difficult to do. And dodging all the stupid, they're not lasers, his lightning balls or whatever. And then putting your 4 copies together at the exact right moment, because trying to maneuver 4 links in a row with the lightning balls is pretty difficult. And then being in position to reflect them back at the right distance so that one doesn't fly off somewhere. Like, it can take a while.
So I found the best strategy is to activate 3 of your replication plates and then maneuver around to avoid the lightning balls. And then as soon as you dodge the last one, hit that 4th one to activate all of your 4 replicants and then get into position. Because trying to dodge those electrical balls with all 4 copies is basically impossible. And if any one of your copies gets hit by an electrical ball, you get electrified and lose a heart. They don't just disappear. You get shocked. So I started just like doing it on my own, on my one sum, and then going after Vati with the replicants after that.
Yeah. What I tend to do that's like, this is a bad thing to do. Like, I get stuck in a thing where it's like, if you have all 4 of them, you want to get away, and you hit R to try and roll away. And if you hit R, it just deletes all your disappearance. Yeah. But I have done that so many times where I just panic and I'm like, I gotta roll, but then I lose all my guys. So yes, it is generally better to just get the 3 ready and then deal with walking around slowly or strafing around slowly until you get the 4th one.
It's a good pro tip for sure. I think that honestly, just to put a cap on the discussion around all 3 phases of this boss together, I think it's great. It really takes some time to make it through all of this. Frustratingly so if you're dying at all, but even if you're not dying, it's not a short fight. It's not a short series of fights. To me, this feels like a better execution on the non-Ganon final boss fight gauntlet than the Nightmare, right? Like, it's doing a similar thing as the final Nightmare in Link's Awakening. I think it's just doing it better and in a more interesting way.
Yeah, I would say this is probably top 3 final boss fight as well. Like, just very, very good. Like, mechanics wise, very, very good. Very enjoyable.
I would need to think about that, because there are a lot of really fun final boss fights.
And maybe top 5.
But it's definitely up there. I mean, I really, really, really enjoyed it. For as difficult as it was, I had a really fun time with it. But
how often do you get to say that a Zelda game was difficult combat wise?
Not often. I mean, I am not challenged this way in a Zelda game all that much. And so I do appreciate that whenever it crops up, because I'm always looking for these games to be harder. And sometimes I find ways to do that for myself just to make it interesting, and I appreciate that this one did it just completely on its own. And it helps that I had absolutely no memory of how to do any of these things. Like, completely gone from my mind was the solution to any of this stuff. So that helps as well. But
that was one of my favorite things about this whole game, honestly, it was basically like playing it for the first time again.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Completely agree. Do we have anything else we want to say about Vati, the final dungeon, any of this before we move out of part 3?
I'm good.
You good, Josh? Alrighty, let's go ahead and get into part 4, which is Bloopy Trails, where we talk about interesting things that diverted our attention. This one was interesting for me this week because I was under the mistaken impression, based on our conversation with Mike last week, that once you go into the Elemental Sanctuary, you are locked in to the end of the game.
Lots of people think that.
Yeah. And I understand why. Like, it's really easy once you're in Dark Hyrule Castle to just assume, it's like, okay, well, let's go beat this thing now, right? And that's probably the way that I would have done it as well. There's a throwaway little bit of dialogue that mentions that you're able to leave the castle after a certain amount of time. Once you free King Daltus from the prison, after that point, you're able to leave the castle and go back out to Hyrule Town or whatever and do whatever you want. But I didn't know that. I was assuming that once I was in it, I was in it. And so I was trying to finish as much Bloopy Trail stuff as I possibly could. And, a lot of that was just kinstones and things. I got the magic boomerang. Let's see. The big one for me this week was that I got all of the Tiger Scrolls.
Yeah, so did I.
And also visited the other 2 dudes who don't give you Tiger Scrolls, but do give you upgrades.
I was going to ask y'all about that to see how many you got.
Greyblade and Grimblade?
No, Scarblade and Splitblade.
Yeah.
They definitely give you Tiger Scrolls because you have to have 7 in order to go talk to Swiftblade the first.
No.
So there are
11.
Yeah, 11.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, maybe I
think they are still technically Tiger Scrolls, but maybe it doesn't show up in the menu that way or something.
You don't get Tiger Scrolls from these guys. So there are 7 Tiger Scrolls that you have to get, and then you can go get the 8th from Swiftblade the first. And then there are 2 or 3.
There's 3.
There's 3 additional.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, there's 3 additional dudes who give you upgrades to your combat abilities, but you don't get Tiger Scrolls for them.
Okay.
So those 3 abilities are: 1, decreases the amount of time it takes to charge your spin attack.
Mm-hmm.
There's 1 that decreases the amount of time that it takes for your duplication meter to fill.
Okay.
And then there's 1 that makes it so that your great spin attack lasts longer.
Okay, I guess I didn't get any of those.
Okay. The increased charge rate on the spin attack and the duplication meter is a huge help in the final dungeon.
The duplication meter, I forgot that was a thing for a long time because I just don't bother with this most of the time. Because you just don't, like I said, I'm rushing through the game a lot of the times. It's just like, I can live without it. But once you have it again, you're just like, wow, this is so much easier.
Yeah, it's really, really, really great. And it's fun because I like the little differences in personality between all these combat masters, right? I forget which one it is. Like, most of them are so serious, but some of them are a little different from one another. There's one of them, I can't remember who it is, but when you go talk to him, he's like, I am a great combat master and stuff. I can teach you things about combat and so on. Go forth and be a master of combat and stuff yourself. And it's like, cool. I'm glad you take all this seriously. So that was the main thing that I did this week. The only thing that I had said that I really was going to try and do that I didn't get done is I didn't finish the Mysterious Walls Goron Kinstone thing. I didn't get the 4th boss.
No, I didn't either. I said, screw that. I didn't want to go track him down.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite side quests. It's very weird, but because it's weird, it's just memorable that why are you fusing kinstones with random cave walls?
Yeah, exactly. Josh, I mean, I know you finished playing this a little while ago, but do you have any Bloopy Trails that you want to talk about?
I was going to bring up the Tiger Scrolls in particular because that just is a neat one. But otherwise, yeah, just sort of generally, like I love the Kinstone system. Like it's one of my favorite Zelda side quest things. So I did not bother doing all of them in this particular playthrough. I have done all of them recently, like within the last year or 2. I did a 99% run where I did everything except the figurines. I actually tried to do the figurines and I gave up about 80% of the way through. I was just like, I'm done. And that was
understandable.
That was before you had rewind, where you could kind of cheat it. It's probably a little easier now. I was doing it on the Wii U. But yeah, I ran around and did some of the just doing kinstones, and but no, they're just, I just like the system. I don't know how else to say it. I know y'all have talked about it a bunch already, but it just makes you go back to places and revisit things and remember that you saw that weird looking wall or that tree with vines on it, and that you're going to come back for it later again. And I wish there were more things like it in the series, honestly, or that they would bring it back, even if they didn't bring it back as like the only way to get items like this. That's maybe it's one big flaw, is that every collectible is hidden behind a kinstone. But otherwise, I just really like spending time doing kinstones.
Awesome. How about you, Matt? Bloopy Trail.
I mean, you talked about all the ones that I did, except I didn't get the 3 extra ones. I purposefully went and tracked down the 7 Tiger Scrolls so that I could get the Swiftblade first. And that was really all that I kind of focused on. Close to now that we're at the end of the game, I was like, I don't really feel like tracking every person down for Kinstone Fusion. As much as it was a really enjoyable system to make you really explore Hyrule a lot, because the reward for like 80% of them is large amounts of rupees that I did not need for any reason whatsoever. I was just like, I don't really need to do that. So,
yep.
Do you know what the reward for doing all of it is?
No, what is it?
It's a heart container.
Ooh. You get a whole heart
container, yeah.
That's cool.
Meanwhile, doing all the figurines gets you a piece of heart.
Nice.
You make it sound so worth it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on then to part 5, which is Z targeting, where we lock onto fascinating characters or enemies that we happen to cross. Matt, I'm going to let you go first.
I think I'm going to take this opportunity to use Vati, because I have not used Vati yet, and we get main characters once a season. Vati, while his motivations are semi-unclear, dude really knows how to show up with some drip. Like he goes all out. Especially Vati Reborn is like one of the coolest designs for an enemy that has ever been in a Zelda game. I think he is wildly fun to fight. He is wildly fun to just admire from an art standpoint. The mechanics are interesting. I think, and just having a main villain who is not overshadowed or taken over by Ganondorf or Demise, like it's just Vati and he's the guy. Like that is a novelty in Zelda that I appreciate so much that he has got to get a shout out just for being that.
Yep. Good call. Definitely good call. I was gonna
add on Vati. Y'all were talking about Vati Reborn. Have you seen how he looks in the manga?
Nope.
Nope.
You might go look that up on ZeldaWiki.wiki. That just in the gallery for Vati. So I think they made him look pretty cool. There's a couple different shots, I guess, where he's maybe just taking on the form in different ways. But yeah, there is very much just like he's like a big Minish sorcerer. And I think that Himekawa got it right.
Okay, cool. Is Vati your Z targeting as well for this week, Josh?
No. I have a more fun one. I gotta be unique and weird.
Go for it then.
I'm gonna go with aforementioned Split Blade, the goat here who gives us the best Tiger Scroll that charges that spirit gauge. So yeah, going with the one. He lives behind a waterfall. He has a really cool dojo behind a waterfall. So yeah, and he also has very cool other names. Since I'm looking at the Zelda wiki page, in German, he's not named Splitblade. His name is Dustin, and
His name is Dustin.
in Italian, his name is Kent.
Okay.
In
Cool.
Spanish, his name is a little bit more Spanish, and it's Hashin, but still.
Dustin. I freaking love it.
So this is a case of
man.
Nintendo of America having too much fun with the Blade brothers and deciding they all needed Blade in their name. When everyone
I'm
else,
here for it.
everyone else was
Yeah.
just like, how about Joe? Just
Oh gosh. Okay. All right. Freaking love that. Now I want to see Dustin in a later Zelda game. I feel like we just deserve that at this point. Yeah. I do want to say too, if I ever have a dojo, then I'm going to be disappointed in myself if it's not behind a waterfall. Like, what are you even doing at that point?
all right. I have to do a bonus Z targeting here. That is a complete accident because we were just having fun laughing at Dustin and Kent. So I just clicked one of the other brothers just to kind of see and randomly clicked Waveblade. And I promise this is just completely random. Waveblade's German name is Maximilian.
No
Maximilian
way.
Nichols?
That's
Oh,
hilarious.
man. Hyrule Interviews, is that you? Freaking love it. Okay, so mine, you know what? I was going to go with Vati, but I don't know. I think I have one that struck me as being a little more funny this week. And that's this one random guard. One of the dudes who you unfreeze as soon as you gain the ability to do so. There's this guard, and then there's the minister, and then another guard who's blocking the door. The guard who's not blocking the door, when you unfreeze him, and you have to remember, you've just gotten done with this giant cutscene in which you learned the entire background of what's going on. You learned about the light force. Vati appeared to you as King Daltus and then became Vati, right? And then says, I have all this power now. I'm freezing these people and I'm changing the world and behold my godlike power, right? You've just gotten done with that whole conversation. And then you come out and you unfreeze this guard and he talks to you and he's like, dude, you'll never believe it. The king was Vati the whole time and he froze us all while, like in his mad quest to find the light force and all this other stuff. I'm just sitting here like, dude, I know.
I was there.
I just had this conversation with Vati. But thank you. I appreciate you trying to help me in this situation, buddy. But you're a little behind the times here. So the oblivious guard is going to be my Z targeting pick for this week. So it's just like you really tried your best, but sorry to say you're not giving me any new information here, buddy. I wish it was a little bit more epic than that, but he really struck a chord with me. Alrighty, let's go ahead and get into part 6, which is our final thoughts in which we let Matt wrap up this section of the game in as succinct a way as he can think to do.
So we end our time with the Minish cap by capping it off with a really phenomenal final dungeon that pushes us to the limits of our puzzle solving and combat abilities, moving into a phenomenal 3-phase final boss fight that is unique for character, unique for... what's the word I'm looking for? Mechanics, and unique for the lore of the Zelda game, all really coming together to bring us the end of a really great game that we've enjoyed our time with. While the plot may not have been the best part of the game, overall, just a truly enjoyable section of game to cap off a really wonderful Zelda experience.
Yeah, well done as always, Matt. I'm going to Piggy's back, Lyndon.
Yeah. Do it. Piggy's back
on your thought, and just say that I completely agree. In summation, this was about as good of a final chunk of Zelda game, especially for a top-down, as I can kind of imagine. It really was a lot of fun, and I think it created basically an unimpeachable run of episodes for Minish Cap. Right?
I would agree.
No weak links, had great the entire freaking time through. The rank and recap is going to be a lot of fun. Josh, thank you for joining us tonight. Again, weird to only have you on for one appearance in the season, but such is the length of this game that we've been playing. Real quick before we get out of here, doubled it. We could have had an episode just for the Royal Valley all by itself.
I was saying that the developer should have just made the game longer.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, that would have been great. That'd been awesome. But I mean, now we're kind of back to the discussion we had at the beginning of the season, which was like, we know it's a short game. At the end of it, are we going to feel like it was too short? Or are we going to feel like it was short and sweet and we would have liked more, but it was like a perfect product the way that it was?
Yeah, I sort of feel like I wish there was maybe one or two more. Like the Royal Crypt could have just been a whole dungeon. Yeah. I'd been cool with that.
Yep. I need to think about it. I'll have more to say about it next week. But before we get out of here, Josh, because I forgot to ask you earlier in the episode, and I know you are one of those people who does have a ranking and you're constantly kind of moving stuff around on it. Where does Minish Cap land for you?
So it lands for me just outside my top 5. So this is if I had the same experiences today that I'd had in general, but if Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom did not exist, it would be vying for like number 5, like in my top 5. Vying for that 5th position was Zelda 2. So unfortunately, it's like they keep making good games that keep making me want to put them higher on the list. And so like now it's like number 7 or 8. And so that makes it sound worse. But it's actually one of my favorite top-down Zeldas it is my favorite after A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, which wasn't always the case. So I kind of had a fun bonus story. The Minish Cap is basically the reason that I work at Zelda Universe.
No way.
Oh, okay.
So, I've kind of always been in a routine of replaying Zelda games. It's just kind of always been a thing I did. There just used to be a lot fewer of them to replay. But I beat the Minish Cap when it came out, and I remember like practicing fighting Vati lots of times. But then I couldn't play it anymore, and I didn't really like it for several years. I would start the game and like get to the first dungeon, and then I just feel like I don't want to play this and be done with it, which was highly unusual for me since I was playing A Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time just constantly. And then at one point I was writing just articles on my own, and I decided I was going to write like a scathing review of the worst Zelda game ever, and so I forced myself to finish the Minish Cap again in 2011, and ended up falling in love with it. I was pretty surprised, and I wrote an article about it, and at the time I did not work at Zelda Universe, but of course I knew everyone, and I asked Cody if he would publish it for me as a guest article, because he had done that for me before. And he declined and instead wrangled me onto the staff.
Cody has a habit of doing that.
Yes. So I was like, I had already known Cody for several years at this point. So that's kind of how I ended up making the jump. Ultimately, was because I set out to tell everyone how bad the Minish Cap was. And instead wrote an article basically proclaiming it as one of the greatest in the series. And this was prior to Skyward Sword, this 2011, before Skyward Sword came out too. So yeah, it was just kind of I always look back on it fondly now, and I replay it a lot. There have been years I finished it 3 times in 1 year, like practicing for doing charity marathons and such, and just overall enjoying it quite a lot. So it's one of the Zelda games I have completed the most times, when in 2010 I had only ever finished it once.
Well, I'm certainly likely to come back to it a little more often now that it's accessible.
Yeah, that was the biggest problem, was the accessibility. Yeah. In my opinion.
Mhm.
Sorry.
So, yeah, but, hey, glad that sequence of events panned out the way that it did, because the rest, as they say, is history. And now we've got Josh from Zelda Universe, and not just Josh.
Not just Josh.
Not just Josh who thought he hated Minish Cap but didn't really.
Yeah, Josh from Zelda Universe, Cody's brother.
Separated at birth, it is known. Well, while we've got you here, before we get out of here, Josh, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know where they can follow you? Of course, you're going to be back on the show at some point before too long, but got to do the thing.
Oh, yeah. So if you want to find out other games and such I'm playing, you can follow me on Threads and on Instagram. I am Watcher Joshua, and I pretty much just share screenshots and clips of games, and only 50% of them are Zelda games, maybe. Sometimes it might be 75% of them. But that's mostly about all I use social media for, is just sharing games I'm playing nowadays. And then you can find my work at Zelda Universe primarily, where you won't see my name on too many articles on the front page, but I'm always there in the background making it go.
Well, I gotta say, if that's the primary mode in which you're using social media, then you're using social media in a much more wholesome way than the majority of people.
Yeah, I just kind of backed off. I'm over it. I'll just share cute pictures from video games. It's fine.
Good for you. I wish more people were like you, Josh. Be like Josh. He's a good guy. All right. Well, like I said, we'll catch up with you again before too long. Guess we're going to be talking about Spirit Tracks pretty soon.
So. Got 46 more minutes.
Yeah, I know. Anything could happen, I guess. I mean, we'll see. Lord knows I'll be watching. But of course, we've got some wonderful people from our Discord community who are actually doing Matt and I a solid and providing some copies for us to play. So thus eliminating a big part of the headache on our end of things, which we really do appreciate. Our community is really fantastic. Matt, are you ready to get out of here for the week? Got one more Minish Cap episode. We're going to have the detective back on, as he is wont to do, to rank and recap this game against the other ones that we played.
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's close it out before we go into my bachelor party weekend. It's going to be an interesting. It's going to be an interesting Sunday.
Oh boy,
we got to do that sometime in the next, 7 days.
2 bachelor parties in less than 5 months is not like my
dude. My old body cannot take that anymore.
Just can't do it. I can't do it. All right.
It's gonna be fun though. We're gonna have a great time. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So
yeah, we're making a leg of lamb, right?
Oh yeah, we are.
Oh, buddy.
I'm smoking that leg of lamb.
God, I can't wait. Okay,
getting it nice and smoky.
So much whiskey. All right,
lots of whiskey.
Yeah, so much whiskey,
and a quarter keg of Shinerbach beer.
Yay! All right, y'all, if you enjoyed today's show and you'd like a little extra Sacred Realms in your life, you can head over to patreon.com/Sacred Realms Pod and become a patron. If you've got no rupees, it's not a problem. 5-star Apple Podcast reviews are a great free way to support us. More reviews means that more people see our show. That makes us very happy Hylians. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Sacred Realms Pod for updates on the podcast and for behind-the-scenes action. Sacred Realms will be back next Wednesday with our thoughts on Minish Cap in its totality. We're going to be ranking and recapping it. If you haven't finished it yet, we'd love for you to play along with us and to share your thoughts on our social channels. The Minish Cap can be played in a variety of places, various virtual consoles, the 3DS Ambassador program, an original cartridge if you have one of those laying around. But you're probably playing it the same way that Matt and I are, which is on the Nintendo Switch Online service. Of course, you can also emulate the game via a variety of platforms, but we ask that you not do that unless you legally own a copy of the game that you're emulating. But in the meantime, may your hearts be full, may your arrows never miss. We'll catch y'all next time. Sacred Realms is an independent, listener-supported podcast, which is produced, edited, and mixed by me, Lyndon Willoughby. Business operations are handled by Matt Willoughby. Our music is generously provided by Darknuck and is available to listen to on Spotify. finally, we'd like to thank Nintendo for continuing to create such exceptional and innovative experiences.